I've prepared a pretty brief presentation on this, just providing an overview of the concept plan that's in front of the city, and then trying to dive in a little bit further into the areas where staff need feedback from the council, and before moving forward, that guidance would be very helpful to not only staff but also the developer. So we're looking at a concept plan just north of Clear Lake. As an overview, this would be an open space planned unit development. So we're looking at 22 units at approximately 45 units per acre. The developer, in this case, Twin Cities Land Development, the total acres of these three parcels are just over 60 gross acres, with about 12, 13 acres in Clear Lake. So that leaves us with, a non-lake area of 48.7 acres. And as the acting mayor mentioned, there is no action to be taken on this. We're really just looking at this advisory feedback to really dive into water service and questions also about stormwater reuse. Okay, so land use analysis. This is something that staff does with all concept plans. For this one, we're looking at a collection of parcels that are zoned agriculture. This development would then be zoned open space PUD if it were approved by the city. This area, these parcels are obviously within that shoreland overlay of Clear Lake. And so we're looking at various impacts that I'll go into further detail about. And lastly, just if you're looking at the comprehensive plan, this area is guided rural area development. So up on the screen is the proposed concept by Twin Cities Land Development. You'll see the 22 single-family units proposed on a 2,000-foot approximate cul-de-sac. And so that cul-de-sac does not have any other connections, and it would have, as proposed in this concept plan, water main running under that public road. You'll see the things that you'll typically expect from open space developments in this project. So it's got proposed to come with a community septic system to serve the units for sewer. And it has buffers surrounding all of the units and buffering them from adjacent properties and vice versa. 50% open space is proposed as part of this project, and that 50% is the upland area. There are a couple of stormwater ponds proposed just north of Clear Lake to manage stormwater. So in terms of the units, what would you expect to see? The developer provided a narrative, and these are just a few of the different units that are provided in the narrative as an example. So looking at whether the project meets the OP-PUD minimum criteria, we have to look at the zoning, the lot area, and we're looking at all three lots together, and making sure that lastly it's in single ownership, and this project would meet all of the city's minimum criteria for open space developments, and the land use as single family is something that is allowed in those developments. Looking at the open space design standards, we first start with the density of the project, which in this case is exactly at the maximum of 0.45 units per acre, 22 units. The lot design, for the most part, this project either meets the criteria based on just an overview of this concept, or we need a little bit more information to confirm that it meets. So I just want to mention here to make sure that I hit that, the lots would be over 16,000 square feet and over 100 feet wide. Those are some of the basic criteria for the lots. We also look at development standards in OPPUDs, and this is an area where we don't necessarily have enough information at the concept plan stage to verify conformance, but it does appear that the development can meet these provided that more information is provided to substantiate that. So we're talking about things like the open space and making sure that there's an appropriate easement over that. Having a septic system, we need to just verify that there's information the community septic would meet the standards for the city or the MPCA. Looking at building standards, it appears that the buildings proposed on these different lots would be able to meet the setbacks. Landscaping, again, that's not something that we review at this stage. impervious surface, we don't have, that level of detail either. So there's a few things, but it looks like relatively straightforward project and that it can meet the city's requirements. Shoreland overlay, so this is where we have to also review against a lot of different standards for impacts on Clear Lake. First of all, the land use would require an additional CUP be requested for a PUD in the shoreland area. The lots generally appear to meet in most cases, but would require what's called a shoreland PUD, and so that's flexibility. That is provided for within the shoreland ordinance, and this development would appear to meet the minimum criteria for shoreland PUDs. So relatively straightforward review for shoreland overlay and OPPUD standards. This project was presented at the concept level to the city's Parks Commission. There was a discussion about whether a park is necessary in this type of development. OPPUDs have really large lots and they have large amounts of open space. So there was a decision that for this particular project, cash in lieu would be a better path forward to support the city's parks and trails system. A number of the city's review staff were able to review and provide comments, and those were included in the report, so I won't go into great detail here, except for I do want to get into some of the comments that also relate to the city engineering review. So this part of the presentation will kind of shift into some of those areas where we're looking for feedback from you. The first area and primary area is the water supply. So as you see in the concept plan, on that 2,000-foot cul-de-sac, there is a water main that would support water service for these proposed units. That's a 2,000-foot long dead-end water main that's being proposed on the concept plan. That is much longer than what the city's engineering and design standards would allow for. Uncertainty, so we do have some obvious uncertainty about the surrounding areas. We don't know how and when they may develop, if ever. I would also mention that the city has a longstanding policy on new development requiring new projects to connect to the city's water supply system. As you know, there are contamination issues in Lake Elmo with PFAS and other concerns for the water supply. This leaves the city with a few general considerations. Not all of the options are great options, but I've attempted to kind of break things down a little bit, and we'll talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. So the first option is to say that we need an extension of the water main from an existing area so that we have a looped system. That would be the first option, is to have this system not be a dead end. The second option is to allow for a dead end, and we'll talk about what that would look like. Third option is to consider allowing private wells to serve these properties. And the fourth is to consider the development premature because there's not supporting infrastructure. So on the water main extension, it might be kind of difficult to see on the screens, but this is the city's water system map. It shows where the water mains run throughout the community. And in this area, I've attempted to show a couple different ideas for how connections could be made. On the screen, you'll see the cursor pointing to this red line that's supposed to be that dead-end water main. In the dashed lines, these aren't any particular alignment, just looking at what makes sense right off the bat here. Looking at two different possibilities for how this development would connect into the city's water system. One option is to connect to the north to the Hidden Meadows development. There's one property owner in between this development and the city's water main. And the other option would be to run a connection to the east. There is a water main present at the 50th Street North and Lake Elmo Avenue intersection. If we're looking at dead-end water mains as the next possibility, this is something that is challenging from a public works perspective in particular, because you have concern about having stagnant water. And so what that would require is periodic and potentially frequent flushing of the water main through certain valves that are built into the system. And that does have the potential to waste large volumes of treated water when that flushing occurs to eliminate concerns about stagnant water. A couple of conditions that, if this were to be considered, should be strongly considered would be phasing of the development, requiring that the building permits at the very east side of the development get issued first. Another possibility is if the city is looking into stormwater reuse, having that flushing of the city's treated water at least go into an irrigation, a pond to be used for irrigation. Another option, again, not a great one, is private wells to serve these 22 different units. This is an important point here. This would be a reversal of a longstanding city policy about not allowing for wells in new development. You see the water map on the right side of this slide, and there's a considerable amount of water main that's been built throughout the years in this area. So having private wells would also kind of be underutilizing that existing public infrastructure, but also they could be at a slightly higher cost due to possible contamination in this area or concerns about PFAS. Lastly, it does appear at this time it is possible that the wells could qualify for filtration under the MPCA grant, but that would need to be confirmed at a later date. So those are the kind of three different options that the city has for water. And the last option that I mentioned was to consider the project premature, and it would be premature if, for example, the water main extension were required and that couldn't happen, then it would have to be premature. Want to really quickly talk about stormwater reuse. So this is something that the city has required in a number of recent projects, and so I just wanted to make sure we made space for that question. Is the city council looking for stormwater reuse out of this project? If it's a yes, then if it were to move forward, staff would be looking for that to be shown in the plans. It brings me to one of my last slide here, feedback requested. So number one, how should the development be served by water? Number two, how should we anticipate the city council would require stormwater reuse? Are there other parts of the project that the city council would care to comment on, or and in addition to that, if there are any other considerations for parks as an example. So that's what I have. Again, this is just advisory. The next steps, if this were to move beyond this conceptual stage, would be for the developer to move forward with their applications for preliminary and plat and PUD. So with that, I would note the developer is here if you have questions for them. Otherwise, I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Nathan. Any questions for?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
In the memo, you talked about the projects within the Shoreland Overlay District and that the minimum lot size would be 80,000 square feet. So,
Yeah.
but they're proposing something less than that.
Yep, that's a good question. So the city's shoreline overlay ordinance, I'm gonna go to the map so you can see. The city's shoreline overlay ordinance creates a 1,000-foot buffer from the ordinary high water level of Clear Lake. And Clear Lake is noted as a natural environment lake. And in addition to that, this area is not sewered. So those two factors, there's a chart in the shoreline ordinance that assigns the lot area, the minimum lot area based on those factors. This would have an 80,000 square foot minimum, as you mentioned. With that being said, the shoreland ordinance does also have a process for flexibility to allow for developments to have a smaller footprint for their units. And so that's the process that this developer would be utilizing. In that case, what we do is a tiering analysis where we look at tiers that are fixed distances from the water, and we review for the density of units within each tier. And we did that analysis and even got the DNR to agree that we did it right, that it would meet, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'm glad you did it right.
I was happy to hear that as well.
Nate, correct me, well, inform me. I remember the shoreland density levels on the project that was proposed near 94 on that lake. What was that project called?
That would have been the Kramer Lake, I believe.
Kramer Lake. Thank you. Other questions for Mr. First?
Yeah, what would the impact on the lot to the north be if the extension of the water main had to be run through that lot? Going to the neighbor to the north, what would that look like?
Yeah, so that would have to be a private discussion, I would think, between this developer and that property owner to see if they can secure the ability to get through there with the water main. So.
So they'd have to
Yeah, if the,
purchase some of the land?
I would
or-
think an easement at a minimum.
Okay. Okay.
One more question? Oh, go ahead, Nick.
Thank you. So the other option was running the water main to 50th and Lake Elmo Ave, was that correct?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to go back to my slide. Here. So yeah, there's two possible alignments just to my eye. The other alignment, if we weren't to go north to connect through to Hidden Meadows, would be to go almost due east. There is a water main that exists at that intersection. Yep.
Okay. Now, if you were to go east, do you have to go through more or less people's property to get to said location?
Assuming that the water main would run along 50th Street North, like under the street, I think we would only be looking at, looks like to me on this parcel map, just one property would be the same, but that distance is considerably further, I would say.
Okay,
Yep.
got it.
And the developer would be covering the costs of that water main extension, correct? That'd be their responsibility?
Yeah, typically in Lake Elmo, the policy has been that development pays for
Okay.
the utilities that are needed.
I didn't see any mention of this, so I presume my search was decently correct. But there wasn't any mention of trails or green trails along the shore of the lake, correct?
Yeah, that's something that I think we would want to take a harder look at if this gets to the kind of next level of the review out, the preliminary plat stage. We might be looking at how do they provide the trails that are required by the ordinance and where do they provide them? That would be a really interesting trail in the open space around the lake.
And then Marty, your memory is probably better than mine. I know I've had discussions, at least internally in my brain, but what have we talked about with Keats in terms of ever the idea of a trail along Keats? Obviously, this will be one property for one section, but do we have that in the CIP as even a hypothetical?
There's been some discussion, definitely, about getting people down to 47th. And then in the future, 47th would likely have a trail along it heading east and west. So there isn't necessarily a plan for it, but it's been discussed many times, and it's on a more or less of a watch to do in the future.
We've never got to the point of a fiscal analysis on that.
Design or anything, no.
Thank you.
It would definitely benefit by grabbing a lot of those neighborhoods and then getting them into town. So it is a desired location for a trail.
Thank you.
Okay, so just in trying to understand the options here a little bit better, with the wells, you mentioned that the concern there is it's a little bit of it's a reversal of the policy that's been taken. Can you maybe just give a little more insight on that? I mean, is that like a legal issue? Is that, if we reverse that, I guess, yeah, if you could just talk a little bit more to the concern of
Yeah.
making that switch.
Absolutely. So I'll just kind of reiterate that, yeah, again, the city's longstanding policy has been that new development is to have a city water connection. And I think I'll ask Jack to help me out a little bit here with some of the history of that policy and how it's been applied.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, council. Got to take you back a little ways to probably
Yes, please.
get you up to speed on this
Yeah,
one.
thank you.
If you just think about, let's go interior to smaller, cities, first-tier suburbs, things like that. Most cities in the metropolitan area, the entire city's the MUSA. So as you grow, you extend city and water efficiently with all developments, and you just build contiguously, and you just keep building out your system. And so in most cities, there's very few areas where if you build, you connect to city water and sewer, and that's it. Lake Elmo is very unique, going way back. We had very small area of MUSA, so coming out of the 2005 lawsuit with the Met Council, you defined a MUSA area around your old village, and you defined a MUSA south of 10th Street. Those were the only two areas that were to get sewer and water. And then in 2004, right about that same time, there was the discovery of PFAS. So very little was known at the time, and the city developed a policy where we need to, any new development, any growth needs to be on city water. And that's why if you look at that water main map, you see places like Sanctuary, Discover Crossing, Tapestry, Farms of Lake Elmo, all across. These are all your open space developments. They all put water in as they developed. And so it was done kind of inefficiently because they're big lots. They're not your standard growth. But that was the policy of the city faced with this unknown of how to deal with PFAS. And now as a city, once you're committed to growing a city utility, you need to grow it efficiently on the best interests of the entire community, not kind of one-off here on this property and that property. So you're kind of looking at how do you build the system out? How do you make sure when you build it here and you build it there, how do these pieces get connected? So that's kind of what you're faced with doing. We were pushing forward. More recently, we came out of the 3M settlement. We had planned to connect a lot more neighborhoods. We connected about 8 or 9 additional neighborhoods to city water. And then just recently, the last 2 years, the MPCA put that plan on pause. So now there's a plan in place to, if there's a private well and there's a PFAS hit, the MPCA will put a filter on that in perpetuity, rather than extend city water. So there is the possibility of the city now with this new information probably needs to, as part of your next comp planning phase, to revisit this and look at your city as a whole and decide where is water appropriate, where is it not? But right now, we are in this mode when we have this policy of new developments, you connect to city water.
Okay. That was very good history, thank you.
Question on, if we go with a dead-end water main, which, we know is not recommended necessarily, is the cost of flushing it and maintaining that dead end a cost that's paid for by the utility as a whole, or is that paid by the development every time it's done?
Currently, there's not a policy for that, so it's flushed at our expense by Public Works.
Jack?
One other consideration with the flushing policy is you're also, when you're looking at your appropriations permit, is we have efforts in place where we're trying to bring down the per capita water use. So it's kind of difficult to look at a system where you're knowingly going to be wasting water on a regular basis.
Go for it.
In one of the extensions of the water main, the one on the lower part of the map where it goes over to Justice Hideaway, then goes across to near well number 4. Are those properties along there developed or are they undeveloped, do we know?
The properties, the one parcel between, I'll call it this proposed development and the 50th Street North corridor, where you would have the water main, is currently used for agriculture. It is possible that property could develop as an OP PUD under the current land use rules. So it could be developed, in other words, in the future, if that property owner decided to move forward with that.
So if we were to look at a water main extension in that case, there could be future potential connections that could offset the cost of that extension.
Possibly.
When I was in Spokane, we used to call those latecomer agreements. And so the developer would put in the line to make the loop or oversize, and then when future developments hooked on, they would pay a latecomer's fee to access that water, which would then be reimbursed to the developer because they put the cost of putting the water main in.
More questions? Or are we in the feedback stage?
Maybe it'd be nice to hear from the developer on, there's a few options there and kind of their preferences and their thoughts on it, and, maybe just talk about the development a little more.
Come on up.
Excuse me. Council Ben Schmidt, Twin Cities Land Development. Happy to answer any questions. I think relative to Water supply, we certainly understand some of the challenges, right? For you as a city and us as the developer. I mean, given the, potential for PFAS out here and the fact that there's a water main that runs right by the thing, I think doesn't make sense to have private wells. I think it should be on city water. And the question just becomes the feasibility of looping it. We had talked to staff about, do we loop it within our own development? I mean, that does get it back to the main. Obviously, it's not an ideal situation, but one that maybe could be accomplished. I think that the challenge for us becomes in trying to loop to either Hidden Meadows to the north or to the well site to the southeast is just going through other people's property that obviously we don't control. Hidden Meadows, going to the north, the city does have a parcel there that actually connects to the road. And so it would be just one property owner that we've got to get through. I think I disagree with Nathan if we go to the southeast. I think we got to go through 2 or 3 in order to technically get down to 50th, is it 50th? And so that's just our concern. Obviously, it's a cost concern as well, but when we looked at the fact that we'd have to loop it on our own property anyway, likely, and so, the cost is a concern. The bigger concern is just the ability to get it done. And, if it's the city's pleasure that, hey, it's the only way we're gonna let it develop, then these parcels may just be undevelopable. And the challenge, I think, becomes just, who's the first person, you know what I mean? It becomes, are they all undevelopable because no one can ever kind of be first? And that's what we looked at is, what are maybe some potentials to allow someone to be first? And obviously you get a water main to the east, and then it becomes a little more feasible for some of these other properties to develop, and off they go, and the line gets looped. But it's hard to be the first guy, it just is.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you.
All right, appreciate it, thanks.
Thanks.
So I believe there were 2 main points staff was looking for feedback on. One was the water line. Second was water reuse.
That sounds right.
I can start it off as well. They have every right to ask for this, and the OPPUD allows for a lot of this. It doesn't allow for all of it, though. And we already had one that was similar at Kramer Lake, and that didn't get past sketch plan, in part because of the density in the different shoreland overlay layers. I'm pretty firm on my end in terms of you can't have a dead-end water line, especially that's 2,000 feet long. And it is true, we have been extremely consistent, 100% consistent. There have been no new developments that have been on a private well since PFAS was discovered. In this case, we have within a quarter mile, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 well advisories directly on the west side of Keats, and we even have 2 just to the east of this development. So I wouldn't have expected it even 5 years ago, but we have PFAS in this area, and it shouldn't be there, but it is. So I would agree that private wells are not a solution. I would slightly enjoy having private wells there just because of the White Bear Lake lawsuit, but in this case, we're pretty consistent in terms of city water, so you gotta build it right, and it can't be looped. In terms of stormwater, we've also been extremely consistent. Every development I can recall in the last couple of years, except one, whether it's business or residential, has had stormwater reuse, specifically because of the White Bear Lake lawsuit and because it's good practice. It's simply good practice to conserve water. Our residents believe in it, we believe in it, so I think those are 2 very firm concepts on my end. And I'll leave it at that for now. I know we've had a couple pieces of feedback come in. I've had a couple phone calls as well, and I appreciate all of you who are here. Obviously, it's not to listen to our future agenda item. I presume it's for this item, so thank you for those who are here. Some of the feedback that came in was concerns about traffic on Keats. So I guess a question would be, there wouldn't be a traffic study until the application is made, correct? And would this even qualify for the need for a traffic study?
I don't know that it would warrant a need for a traffic study. I'm gonna look over at the engineering staff.
I don't think the number of units
Yeah, so it's pretty low.
justifies it.
And I will say, like, the owner has every right to ask for this process, and it does qualify in many areas for this. The density for this is less than the density at Tapestry. I was counting the numbers, and that's slightly nearby, just to southwest. But there are things that have to happen in order to at least move along the process. So unless those things happen, I am very skeptical.
Well, I'll touch on the 2 points for the water and the stormwater reuse. You know, as far as for the options, I very much agree the dead end just isn't an option for me at all. I personally, I'm actually okay with the thought of wells. Unless I'm missing something there, like as far as the legal standpoints from the city being liable, I don't think the city's liable for that. I mean, it's pretty well known. You know, hopefully the developer would be very open and transparent of that these lots have PFAS contamination, and then it's on the people who are purchasing those lots to make the decision, one, if they even want to move into that lot because of it, and that's kind of a risk the developer's taking, if that was the case. And then two, you know, there is the option, like Jack was saying, for the filters. We have one at our house in perpetuity. Again, you know, I guess there's always uncertainties if that will last forever, and you're kind of on their agenda for how often you can get the filter replaced. And so, of course, there's downsides to it, but I'm open to that. I guess my only concern is if we would go down that path. Jack mentioned this, that maybe that might be a better thing. It might be premature then until we have the comp plan, just to make sure that we're planning this out versus putting private wells in a neighborhood where maybe we do actually see the need for having a water main extension. So I guess if we went that well direction, I don't know if now is the right time. As far as for me, either the private wells or the water main extension, it seems like going north would make the most sense. Again, unless engineering, I'm missing something there from a water pressure, water system standpoint. That seems like that'd be the most effective, efficient way to loop it. Anything there from maybe that's further down the road?
I haven't we would have to look at it in more detail, but we would want to loop it from the end of the main, not the middle of it as it's shown,
Got it.
rather than leave a dead end.
You'd
but-
have to, I guess it would still be probably through one property, but, okay.
But either one probably could work for the purpose that we're looking at.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's my feedback for the developer on it is, the dead end, not an option. I don't think the option that the developer brought up as well of looping it just back from the neighborhood, I don't think that's an option that's feasible or efficient for the city's standpoint. And then from the stormwater reuse, obviously if it's wells, I'm less concerned with that. If it is a water main, if they're being served by water, then absolutely the stormwater reuse, especially for the lot size, the stormwater reuse is gonna be critical for me to see that in there.
Nick?
Nick Sandwich?
No more questions for me.
I would concur with the other city council members that I think we have to loop the water main. I leave it up to the engineers and the developer to determine what's the best way to do that. I think, I go back to my latecomers thing, might be an option, but I'm not sure that that works exactly, because it would seem to be somewhat unfair to the developer to have the loop go in and future people hook on, and he's for the expense of putting it in. So I think we need to have some thought about equity in that discussion if there's a loop put in. I think the stormwater reuse for irrigation is also a requirement. We've gone that way everywhere, and we have this water problem we're trying to address. I think we're going to be looking at more of that in existing areas to try and get down to that 70, 90 that we're going to be required. So it's a great development. I don't want to have you leave thinking we're completely shut out on it, but I think we have some challenges. I'm also a person, if we work together, I think we can find a solution to those.
And the trail item as well. I'd be very curious. Again, none of this might happen to begin with. The feedback might be taken in and people might walk away. But I would be very curious about the trail aspect as well.
Yeah, just really quick, council members. So one thing I didn't mention that I should have was that the Parks Commission did talk about a trail being located along the east side of Keats for this project as part of a new trail corridor along Keats. And that this development could be given a 25% credit for inclusion of that particular trail. So just wanted to mention that.
Hypothetically, in order to meet the shoreline requirements for the square foot size, how many fewer lots would be necessary then to meet the shoreline overlay requirements for the lot size?
You would not see many lots. I mean, you're looking at 80,000 is almost 2 acres a lot.
And these are
Right now,
0.45.
they're-
So it'd be cutting it by probably half or more.
Yeah, probably more.
He's got 16,000 square foot per lot.
Yeah.
And the shoreline's 80,000, so you take 5 of the current lots to make 1 to meet the shoreline.
45 lots.
I
I can
don't,
multiply in my head.
I cannot, and I'm not gonna try.
See the calculator?
He's an engineer, I'm a teacher, I don't do math. Were you on the council for the Kramer Lake?
No.
Wow, I'm old. Okay, so in that case, I mean, yeah, we didn't get past sketch plan, and a primary reason was the density within the shoreland overlay, and the basis of, that was additional impervious surface, it's a lake, and it was in an area that the council felt should be protected. I don't know if the council feels the same way here, but that happened with Kramer Lake. And it was kind of fitting a square peg in a round hole, which I don't think is that different here. It seems like there's, with the parcel shapes, where the lake is, yeah, there are absolutely difficulties here, which is probably why it's never, at least in my time, here in Planning Commission, come up for this. So yeah, there absolutely are challenges, but I think we've,
Yeah. And that is, again, I know we had this conversation with a different one of the OPPUDs where, you know, the minimum size versus what they were asking was just so drastically different. In the last situation, it was, hey, our maximum density was 0.45, and they were asking for double that. And it was just such a wide range. And I guess, you know, obviously you brought this to the DNR already, and they kind of gave the hey,
It's-
this is all right. It's such a drastic difference there. I mean,
Yeah, just on that topic, so this development is consistent with the city's OPPUD ordinance for lot area.
Yeah,
So that's,
correct.
that's working, that's
Yeah.
compliant. What the challenge is the shoreline overlay has such large lot sizes that are required that it forces almost any development in the area of a water body to go through that shoreline PUD. There is a process that's afforded in the city's shoreland, ordinance through a shoreline PUD to reduce the lot sizes, but the development has to meet a tiering analysis, like I mentioned, and
and that's
this
been
does.
conducted.
Yeah, it's been done. Yep.
Okay.
And it meets.
And what are they looking for in that tiering analysis? Is it the impact on the lake, on the shore?
It's-
Like, what's,
Yeah, it's the density and proximity to the water. So you think about how basically it's like spreading the units out in a manner that's appropriate. And in this case, we've got an equal number of units in tier 1 versus tier 2. 11 units are allowed per tier, 22 lots.
okay,
a similar thing happened with North Star.
okay,
They have tiers there around Sunfish Lake.
Yep, it's exactly the same process that North Star used.
okay.
Do you have enough feedback for staff purposes?
I think we do.
All right.
Yep.
No other comments? All right. Thank you. 3, speaking of PFAS, water treatment plan proposal, 10th and Inwood, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, council. Wanted to present to you sort of our preliminary site layout for the South Water Treatment Plant that we've been working on the last couple of years. And then talk to you about our next steps. So I'll start off by, and as you may know, we've been looking at the site at the intersection of basically Inwood and 10th Street. And we've shaded it in red there. You can see sort of the pinkish area is what we've identified as the site right now. It approximates about 8.2 acres. And we have sewer available just south of 10th Street at Inwood Avenue. And we have a 12-inch sewer coming north on Island Trail, which is just below that property that's listed at 8830. It's stubbing up right about there. So the treatment facility does need sewer. So to site the facility in this proposed location, we do need to do a comp plan amendment. We've been in touch with the Met Council about that, and we do need to bring the sewer over to that parcel as part of the project to get this done. And so once we identified this site and did some preliminary investigations, we met with the property owner, and one of the asks from the property owner was to do additional area, some portion, this property owner, there's several parcels, but they own the area that's shown in the broader red outline. And they were asking for some portion of that to also be included in the expansion area. So I'm here tonight, I'm gonna walk you through the details of the site layout, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Jason to talk about what that might look like. So the first thing we did, one of the bigger things we had to look at is we looked at the future county right-of-way considerations. We want to make sure we're not building too close to in an area that impedes the county from doing future roadway expansions. So we looked at both Inwood Avenue and 10th Street. We talked to the county, looked at their comp plan, what their requirements are. And near the intersection of Inwood and 10th, they have adequate right-of-way. It's a full signalized intersection with all the turn lanes. So along 10th Street, we've identified that no additional right-of-way will be needed for future improvements. When we looked at Inwood Avenue, near the intersection, we found the same thing, that we have an adequate right-of-way, but as we move north, you can see there's sort of a shifting in the road and narrowing of the right-of-way. So in order to maintain that required 180 feet of right-of-way for future improvements, you can kind of see how we sort of etch that in to have that area. So we worked that into our site plan as a starting point. So this is the site plan that we've come up with so far. If you can see, there's sort of a green dash line sort of meandering around that site. That was the next complexity we have. That's a watershed divide between Valley Branch on the east and South Washington Watershed District on the west. So we spent some time last fall meeting with both watershed districts. They were very collaborative in figuring out how this site would get permitted. We also had to address how, when we go to construct this, when you do a well, you do a test well and then you do a full well. And in both processes, you develop the well, which means you're pumping to waste. And then you do test pumping, which you're pumping to waste again for 24, 36-hour periods of 1,500 GPM. So it's large volume. For any of you that might have been around when we did well 5, we were pumping that discharge to Getchell Pond. We had neighbors concerned, thinking that the water was rising, different things. So we were gauging that level through the whole time. So we were trying to figure out where are we going to discharge this water. We worked at the watershed districts. What the general conclusion is, we don't have stormwater management designed by any means, but we've worked on this subject long enough to feel that the site is feasible and that we have a workable plan. We'll end up taking those discharges at the intersection. You see blue lines. Those are existing culverts. We'll be taking the water underneath that, which goes to the South Washington Watershed District and goes to Armstrong Lake. It's already has PFAS contamination, so the fact that we're pumping PFAS water isn't going to have concerns with that also. So those were some pretty big issues and concerns we had out of the gate that we now feel comfortable moving forward with this site, that we can get this project done. The next piece we looked at was site access. we're building on a major intersection and you can't come in, into those turn lanes. So you can see the access road, we're planning on coming off of the water tower road. You see the water tower site, and then you see we also have a dedicated 80-foot right-of-way. When we purchased the water tower site, we have an 80-foot right-of-way that was intended for a road into that parcel at that time. So what we were planning to do is bring a driveway off of that road down into the facility. And then you can see sort of parking in there, and you can see a circulation that's intended to be able to navigate large trucks for chemical delivery and periodically media replacement. You're bringing in potentially semi-tight trucks that circulate, drive into the building and drive out the other side and circulate through the site. So looking at the site from stormwater management, circulation, and all of the above, and then access up by the water tower. The next thing we were looking at was the building size. The water treatment plant, we're estimating it needs to be 150 by 200 feet. And so that's the red square. There's also some dash lines to the north showing potential room for future expansion. If we need to even grow the facility more in the future, we can add another well and expand the facility out, and that north wall would be built as one of those knockdown walls for easy expansion. And the height of the building is also an issue from the standpoint that when you build treatment plants, you tend to bring the water in up high and you bring it down through the process. You bring it through the pressure filters, and at the end, you put the water in what you call clear storage underneath the building. So usually the building has a basement that's a big clear well storage tank. Those tank elevations have to be above the groundwater and above the high water level of those adjacent wetlands and things like that. So you can see the dark brown contour line, that's the high point. So that was the other thing in the siting of all of this parcel, is we really found that we need to build on that high point. So the building will have some size and scope to it, because it's gonna be a 2 to 2.5 story building, and it's gonna be built on the high point in that location. And then what we don't show is the utility layout. There's gonna have to be the sanitary sewer that I mentioned coming from the east along the north side of County Road 10, getting to the facility. You're gonna have well 6 is planned to be on that site, and then that has a raw water line to the treatment plant. Eventually, we'll have well 7, presumably to the north, maybe at the water tower site or Ridge Park, that has a raw water line coming down to the facility. And then you have the connecting water mains distributing the water out to the system, where we'll be connecting both to 10th Street and Inwood Avenue. So we don't show all that piping because it starts to get pretty messy, but we've been looking at that as well in our layouts. So that's kind of how we fit this in here, and you kind of see that odd shape that I showed you on the first slide, and why we, and then, I didn't mention, you can see the stormwater basins we show hugging along. Those are the blue square, basically. We have bioretention filters, we have a wet pond, and a vegetated swale type of feature, all with a treatment train for the stormwater management for the site, which would then discharge to the Armstrong Lake, like I mentioned before. So that's kind of the site that we have laid out right now, and how we came up with the 8.2 acres. So then the next steps, we've done enough that we're confident recommending this moving forward. We met with the property owner. The next steps would be to, for the city to execute agreements with the property owner. We need a right of entry, purchase option agreements. What we really need to do is to go to the next step of due diligence, and that would include a full topographic survey, doing geotechnical soil investigations of the area, and then also constructing a test well. So when we did test well number 5, I believe it was about $40,000. So, this is where the city gets into really starting to spend money on this site, and that's the purpose for the getting serious with the property owner, making sure we have a willing buyer, willing seller type of thing. But we still don't want to purchase the site yet until we do these due diligence and make sure that the site works with more detail.
For soil testing and some of that analysis, I mean, is there a chance that there's karst here? or karst?
We don't believe there is, but yeah, I don't know.
Because I assume that'd be worst-case scenario.
Yeah,
Solid. If there was, I assume we'd also communicate that to the landowner.
yeah, whatever we investigate would be available to the landowner, whatever those reports are. But I can take questions on the detail of the site now, or we can do questions at the end and let Jason do his part.
All right, so the issue before the council is the property owner requested that you consider expanding the MUSA to a portion of their property. So the question is, should the council consider purchasing the 8.2 acres and only include the portion of the MUSA, or include additional acreage into the MUSA? And if so, how many acres and at what density? So you can see the MUSA boundary here at the bottom is the green section, and then the blue section is where the water treatment plant would be located, and the request from the landowner. So you can see the acreage left over the south, below the green line, is 63 acres. Not all of it's buildable, and that does not include the water treatment plant. They also own the property to the north. So if you're just looking at land use, it's rural area development. The base density is 10 acres per unit. An OPPD would be 0.6 units per acre at this site. So at 63 acres, it would be roughly 38 houses. The request would be to move to low-density residential. That's 2.5 to 4 units per acre. And based on what they provided us, it was the net buildable area is about 51.4 acres, which could result in anywhere between 128 to 205 units. They did provide a concept plan. This concept plan hasn't been reviewed at the same level as the previous Clear Lake. This is just an idea of like what could be at the site and what the densities look like. So this is 2.8 units per acre. It's 144 units, 113 single-family housing units that are to the east, 32 twin homes, which are allowed in the comp plan for this area. Those are the units closer to the water treatment plant. So they would also need PUD flexibility for lot sizes, since LDR requires at least an 8,000 square foot lot and a 60-foot lot width. And the same with the two-family. If you look, you can see the green numbering. There's black and red, kind of gives you an idea of the type of lots that they're thinking, 50, 58, 65-foot frontages that would fit. Large stormwater area. You also see wetlands on the site, so they would have to have buffers from the wetlands. Those are netted out in the density, the wetlands and the buffers.
Are those wetlands considered shoreland overlay required, or are they just wetlands?
They're just wetlands.
Okay.
And then the most important thing from our perspective that we look at, and obviously the council needs to look at, is our plat monitoring. So the Met Council sent over in March where we currently are as a city, and it's 3.88 units per acre. Based on what's gonna occur at the 2050 comp plan, we need to make sure that we remain 3.5 units per acre as a minimum. It is gonna go from 3 to 3.5. And the chart on the left, the bottom, is most important at the overall density in terms of what is set as the density log is 3.15 currently to a max of 5.55. This would bring it down to 3.11 to 5.47, but we would still be, closer with the 3.88. It's just something to consider because the range could be 2.5 to 4. And if the council wanted to consider an even higher density, like a portion of it, medium density, that's something to consider if you were concerned about lowering the overall density. So the next step is to, one of the things we're talking about is going to a closed session, obviously, to discuss everything in terms of moving forward on this project. If there's questions specifically about the MUSA, the property owners here too, so it's anything related to the density or the expansion.
Were those, the drawings that you had on there, were those from the property owner?
Yes, because we basically wanted the property owner to show what the density would look like. And then, concerns about how low Like, if it wasn't cut to come in at 2.5, which is the minimum, we wanted to show kind of what that would look like, and if you want to consider going up to 4, you're gonna have to add considerable amount of units to get up to 4.
And that's the low density right there?
Low density is 2.5 to 4, and this is at 2.8.
Okay. And then, could you go to the next slide, or, yeah, this one? I'm sorry, could you go through this again? And talk with, so the 3.88 units per acre, that's where we're at currently?
Right, so every time
In
we
use of-
approve a plat,
Okay,
they have a better understanding of the units that are existing plus what is gonna be built.
so that's in the MUSA, total as a city, we're at 3.88 units per acre right now. We need to stay above 3.5. Could you talk me through the portion on the right where it talks about the net acres, min units, max units, and how the overall density changes with that?
So I just included the new numbers into, if you look at the left, it says low-density residential, and there's 224 net acres. I just added that and then added it to the range, totaled it up, and just made a smaller chart, so we're not changing the entire chart. Essentially, this chart will have to be updated for the 2050 comp plan, and where it says overall density 3.15, that would have to say 3.5. So there are gonna be choices to be made in the future of, do we wanna have higher density, more acres for higher density? Should the minimum go from 8 to 10? There have to be ways to figure out how to bring it up to 3.5. But for now, we're still at 3.
Other questions for Jason or for Jack?
So actually, yeah, one more question on this. So if we have more development before the 2050 comp plan is finalized, does that change what Met Council is expecting us for our, the units per acre? I mean, so, for example, if this development went through and we ended up doing it the lowest density possible, and therefore our, you know, our current units per acre dropped down, would Met Council consider that and calculate what our 2050 comp plan needs to look like, or is that set?
Well, a couple things would happen. If it can't drop below 3. So if you were to add acreage here and it's at 3.15, that's the first thing that you couldn't see. But regardless of if any projects are approved in the meantime, you will have to meet the 3.5 in 2050 as a minimum. So regardless, we're
So
gonna
then-
have to figure out a way to get the 3.15, which if this were to be approved, would be 3.11 to 3.5.
So if we developed at lower densities now, we're gonna have to develop at higher densities later to make up for it.
That's correct, I think. I think that would be correct. You basically, regardless, are gonna have to probably increase high-density residential from 8 to 15 to like 10. That would be an easier way to kind of boost those numbers. And then it may not actually even add units to the city, it's just in the table, it would add units,
The hypothetical table.
you know.
And you had mentioned staff's intent was to have a closed session to discuss this?
In terms of, I would definitely want comments if you think this is something to move forward with. We will have a closed session soon to discuss it. If you want to ask questions to the property owner, you can ask questions to the property owner, but definitely.
So there will be a closed session at a future meeting, no matter what, for the purchase, for a potential purchase.
Maybe, yeah, a question for the or for the owner, that with the OPPUD as an option, is that something that's considered by the property owner developer, or are they set on going with the low density residential?
I think the owner can talk to this. I think they looked at an OP on the site, and I think the soils are challenging for
Okay.
septic. But that would be something that they could provide information on.
Might be good to hear on. And just hear from them in general on plan and kind of hopes and visions for it.
My name is Paul Schreier, represent the owners of these properties. Yeah, we did lay out a lower density septic lots, et cetera. Pretty disappointed in our soil tests for making some of it work. We did not, not to use a pun, we didn't dig very deep into it at that point because this process was going on. It was quiet for a long time, I think probably quiet from October to a month ago. Maybe it was longer than that, but as you can see, Jack was pretty busy with it. So that's kind of, supplemented all this or supplanted all this. It's pretty hard for us as a land developer to be looking at a sewer line that goes right by our property and not really ask to try to get connected to it. Just being as honest as I can. It certainly looks like a site that, works well and, but again, as far as, being, we're not the most unwilling seller in the world, but again, just to be perfectly frank, it doesn't do a lot for the rest of our property to put a water treatment plant on the corner. So we're certainly looking for, to cooperate and, I don't like the term win-win, I rarely use it, but we don't have the same interest, but I think we have pretty parallel ones that we can hopefully get stuff done here. As far as the concept plan, Matt's firm drew it up at the request of staff, again, to get an idea of what we'd be looking at. There's, it's very preliminary concept. I mean, we didn't modify it, it's basically, we changed the townhomes to twin homes at the request of staff, but again, frankly, I guess I want to hear if council just completely hates the idea before we spend more money tweaking it, right?
On what side were the soil tests not great, the north or the south, the east or the west, or just the entire site?
Pretty much the entire site.
Does that impact our needs? Or are those tests so shallow that it's,
Shallow tests, yes. And I don't know, but is the real answer.
any additional questions for the landowner?
That's all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was the MUSA boundaries are on both sides of it right now? On the east and west side of it?
Just the
Or
west
just
and south.
Just the west and south?
Yep.
Okay.
So really, it's been 10th Street this entire time with the exception of the new school. And then obviously Oakdale has it on the north side of 10th. So you need feedback. Or additional questions.
Well, I mean, I'll start with, I'm very open to this. I mean, obviously, we put a lot of work into figuring out where's a good location for the water treatment plant, and this was one of those locations. It seems, obviously, there's more work to be done still to make sure, if it is a good location for it, I think that, this actually could be a win-win, even though I know he doesn't like that. I think this could be. So I guess I'm open to having that discussion. I think there's a lot of, benefit if we provide the landowner this expansion of the MUSA into their area as well. And I think that's gonna be important to remember, but in general, I'm open to this.
Nick?
I would just echo the same thoughts that I'm definitely open to this. I think it's a great layout, and I think it'd be ultimately a great addition to the city. And it's a great spot for the water treatment plant. I mean, I'm open for further discussion on this as well.
I agree, I'm open to further discussion. I'm a little concerned about the density and where we're going because of the pressure we're under. But I think to continue discussions would be best for both, and sending the MUSA, I think, makes sense. We have that site lined up I think that, including the other parcels in the Muse expansion, makes it a better project for everybody.
I do have something to add too, as I was
Go
thinking
for
about
it.
this, is, again, I kind of mentioned this before in the previous one, is if if we weren't in such a dire situation with the water and wanting to move to get the treatment plant here, I think this would actually make more sense to wait until the comp plan to work through that, yeah, like this is an area that makes sense for expanding into the music, especially with these new requirements that it looks like are gonna be coming up. With that being said, we know those requirements are coming up, so like, again, I'm not, it wasn't part of the last comp plan, but I mean, it seems like this would be a reasonable spot, especially given the water situation, so I know we're kind of expediting it, but it seems like it'd be moving in this direction regardless. So that is just, I guess, my one other thought with, I normally would have preferred to just wait for a comp plan, to discuss this, but given the situation with the water and wanting to get this resolved sooner than later, I think it's worth considering.
Jason, Sophia, Nate, smart people. We have in our budget for this coming year and even the next year projected when we're going to start to bring on consultants to help with the comp plan. When really are we starting the conversations? When are we having the meetings, the collaborations? Are we talking 2026-ish?
2026, 2025, we should have the consultant under contract and moving forward at the end of this year.
So really, we are not that far away from the 2050. I mean, we've gotten the projections from Met Council, and obviously they're starting to send stuff out about 2050. I mean, I'll be honest, I get why the question is being asked. I personally wouldn't have asked it. This is a public health and safety issue, and the 2050 is right around the corner, so I'm surprised yours being asked. But I understand why a person would, I personally wouldn't. It's a great site, I would agree. To me, it's part of the transition between, from 94, we have our higher density, then we have low density at Island Trail, and then we have the park reserve to the north. To me, this would fit with our citywide aspects of transition, and where OPPUD would fit much better. If the soils are what they are, that's obviously understandable, but I always thought that when we were getting to our 2050, that would be a logical thing. I would not have anticipated that a question would come into sewer that large of a section, because there are other buyers who are looking for large quantities of lands. There are sports teams that are looking for large quantities of land. There's multiple athletic teams that are looking for that amount of land that don't need sewer. So if someone is looking to do that, those opportunities exist. We need the treatment plant, that's not in doubt, so when we do get to a closed session, I think we'll have some additional conversation. I don't know if there's additional info I can say in open session.
Just to be clear, the MUSA expansion would just be that southern half of the lot, is that correct?
No, that's correct.
Okay, so like that little less than the top half would be still zoned. Do you remember, what was that? What was it zoned just on the north part? Is that rural?
It's rural.
Okay, okay.
It just seems that we have the issue with the water, we need the site. Working with the owner of the site and the developer to come to something that works for both of us seems to have a lot of logic to me. I recognize we have our challenges, but I don't think this destroys those challenges. And I think there's ways to work together to get what we both need, and walk away from this saying, we all we all came away from this with something that helped make the city and the, and the expansion better.
And I don't disagree with any of that. We've never expanded the MUSA for residential purposes of this size and scale outside of the official decile comp plan process. And this isn't I think this is one of those ones where there's gonna be a lot of feedback and perspective that's gonna be valid from those to the east and to the north, but you are entirely correct. This hypothetical does benefit both sides. You are correct.
And I think if we look long-term, it's inevitable it's going to get developed. So we may be seeing development occur sooner than it might have otherwise happened. But looking at its location, it seems like it's inevitable it would be developed at some point.
I don't think you're wrong.
I never am.
You kind of feel like are you thinking, wait till the discussions for the comp plan 2050 are set?
We need the land. We need the land. I'm not thrilled that this is the conversation that we're having. I'm not, because we're gonna pay a fair market price for it. Not we, the settlement is. And those dollars are being used to protect people's lives. So I'm just surprised that we're having a conversation to change our comp plan to protect people's health. That's my frustration. But as the three of you have correctly indicated, we need the land.
You think I'm not quite understanding, like, you think that the amount of land that is being asked to be added to the MUSA is a little bit,
I think it was surprising to myself.
okay.
I could have seen, hey, 8 acres there, we'll do 8 acres and we'll ask for it to be along 10th Street and have it be business commercial. You know, something that is gonna have a higher resale and is expected because it's close to an intersection. But again, the three of you have spoken and you're not wrong. I don't disagree with you.
I think that's a fair, I mean, I'm not set on it, like, it has to be that. I mean, I think that's a fair argument of, is, you know, the city acquiring 8.2 acres and then 63 acres being added to the MUSA, is that a fair trade? I think that's a fair question.
Especially when it's already gonna be paid fair market value with valuable settlement dollars that are one-time dollars.
The 8.2 acres.
Yeah.
And then obviously the value of the other 63 acres is gonna jump
Yep.
pretty significantly.
Yes.
I wasn't thinking about I was thinking that the city was paying for it. And I forgot that is paid for by the fund, and that is a good point. I mean, that was, my thought is, you know, are we gonna be, I guess I wanna be careful with what I say here. But I think that's a good point.
We talk about the price when we get into our
Yeah.
closed session, but I'm just looking at the concept is all I'm focusing on at this point, not price or other things, just the concept.
I think you have a majority present who are in favor of moving the conversation forward.
Okay.
I believe staff probably would like to have the closed session sooner than later.
Let's do
Right,
that.
Jack? And assuming legal's available next Tuesday before the meeting, would that work, or do we want to push it off?
I think June 3rd.
Okay, okay.
All right, so do not go golfing June 3rd. Okay.
Okay.
Noted.
And the mayor will be back for that meeting as well.
Yes. Thank you, and thank you, Jack and team, because obviously this has been a ton of work to get the design. I know that the 2 watershed issues was massive, obviously going back and forth with trustees. This was a ton of work, and to all those who are watching, thank you for that, because it's highly necessary and your work is definitely understood. Let's talk about the U of M test seed plot. Oh, no. Let's talk about the Public Works Operational Assessment presentation.
I'll just say, acting mayor and council, that staff has been working with Raftella since January on this operational assessment. And so now we have Scott Parker and Brian Kirsch with Raftella to give us their recommendations.
All right, thanks so much, Nicole, appreciate it. Councilman, thank you so much for taking some time to have us talk about your Public Works Department. We did an operational assessment of them over the last about 4 months or so. Want to start by saying how impressed we were and how much we really enjoyed working with Marty, his team, Nicole as well. High-quality staff, and I think it's something you should all be proud of. So, as Nicole mentioned, I'm Scott Parker. I'm a vice president at Raftellus. We do these type of organizational operational assessments kind of all over the country for public works departments. And tonight's, we're going to talk about basically 3 things in the agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about the project itself, give an overview of it. We'll then go into our observations and then some analysis and some recommendations. At that, I'll turn it over to Brian at observations. Brian was the lead project manager for this. I was project director. So the overview of the project, we essentially had 3 sets of goals. The first was to look at your processes, policies, and technology, and evaluate staffing and organizational structure, and then ultimately identify some opportunities for either improved efficiency, effectiveness, or both in your operations group. And that's kind of the gist of the whole thing, with broken down a little bit more into actually the work that we did. So essentially, that was subdivided into 4 steps. Obviously, we began the engagement. We do a lot of context understanding, which revolves a very significant data collection and review process. We also do a lot of staff interviews from multiple levels of the organization, and then obviously reviewed that information and created an as-is state that documents sort of where you all are relative to the organization's strategic goals, your growth possibilities. We've been hearing a lot about these tonight, and some of the things that you're doing now from a level of service perspective. From there, we look at best practices in the utility and in the infrastructure management industries from lots of different sources. And then we ultimately prepare a list of preliminary observations and recommendations. And then go through a process where we actually validate the findings with department leadership to make sure that we're not missing anything. That's done through several iterative steps. And then from there, we ultimately prepared a report with findings and recommendations. My understanding is that has been delivered to you all. You all had a chance to look at it as it relates to tonight's presentation. So that's essentially the nature of the work that we did. And from there, I'm going to turn it over to Brian to talk a little bit about our observations.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you everyone for having us here today. These next 3 slides or so are just general observations to kind of provide some of the context for our findings, and then we'll go into the section labeled analysis and recommendations. Those will contain some more specific observations that relate to the recommendations that we're making. So just some of the general observations, you know, as pretty much everything we're talking about in this meeting here tonight, it's all comes down to growth. It's the #1 workload driver here within the department. And I want to point out specifically that growth in workload for the department has far outpaced the rate of population growth. I think for most people, we relate to population growth when we think pro-growth of the city. But if you go back to about 2013, I think there were 1,000 water accounts in the city. Now there are 3,600. There were about 30 sewer accounts. Now there's, I think, about 2,500 or so. So that level of growth has really been exponential. Some very good news is that we found the department provides a high level of service. It's identified appropriate service level targets, and it meets those targets. The bad side of that is that sort of stress and workload is being done at a somewhat unsustainable pace, and certainly as you grow farther or grow more, that will become increasingly unsustainable. Another good side of the coin is that most of your infrastructure is new, and so it's easy to maintain. But unfortunately, as it ages, even if you do the right maintenance steps, you're just going to spend more time on reactive maintenance. So you're somewhat living the good life now, to an extent. The department last created an additional operator position in 2019, and so that date will stick out for us a little bit, and that's important to us because the operators are the ones, frankly, that are generally out in the field, turning the wrenches, doing the things that need to be done. So we think about 2019 a lot. And if you look just from 2019 to 2023, in those 4 years, we saw a 74% increase in sewer customers, about a 40% increase in sewer pipe length and water customers, a 55% increase in water pipe length, and a 23% increase in park acreage. That's just 2019 to 2023. Obviously, there's been more growth in the intervening 2 years, and all during that time period with the same number of operators. We have a number of versions of these graphs in the report, but this one really distills down what we see quite succinctly, where we look at the number of sewer accounts served per Public Works FTE. And we see that it's been just I don't want to say exponential growth, but it kind of is. So from 2019, when we first got, or last got a new operator serving 131 accounts per FTE, by 2023 to grown to 228. Obviously, that's grown further since then. So that really provides the context that we find ourselves in, and these sorts of things that I've just mentioned in these 3 slides are really probably what brought us here to do this project for you today. So just going into some of our analysis and recommendations, just some of the observations related to this first recommendation. A lot of the work that Public Works does is seasonal or periodic. They're annual things that get done, whether it's paving, whether it's exercising valves in the system, whether it's jetting the sewer system. One thing we heard from operators is that communication is very task-oriented and not so much project-oriented. They don't get to see the bigger picture. So our first recommendation is to create an annual work plan to help articulate when significant work initiatives are scheduled or expected to take place. Ideally, this would identify which weeks of the year these major undertakings are taking place, along with the staffing and resource requirements to do them, post the plan in the workplace, and of course, review and update periodically. And we'll come back to this recommendation in just a second. We heard a lot about PTO. This is one of these areas where strain is showing in the department. And there has been a tension that's kind of built up over the last few years between operators who want to take PTO and the department wanting staff there to get work done. And to kind of put this somewhat into context now, there are enough operators in the department that if you take the amount of PTO that they have as well as sick leave and spread it evenly throughout the year, there's 1 lead operator and 8 operators. You would have at least 1 person gone every day, every work day of the year, and more than 1 on a few days of the year. So obviously they don't spread out their time off like that. Demand for PTO is clustered around holidays, summer, school breaks, etc. And another wrinkle to this that we see is that in the summertime, the department runs a summer schedule, 9 hours a day, 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, and a 4-hour day on Friday. Management believes, and we certainly believe too, that those 9-hour days are more productive. Just being out in the field longer, you get more done. You don't have as much start and stop time for lunches and breaks, etc. The flip side is that everyone wants Friday off because that's a 3-day weekend that they can get for 4 hours of PTO. And who blames them, really? So we've got a couple recommendations related to this. One would like to, in those summer hours especially, separate the operators into 2 work groups, a Monday to Thursday group and a Tuesday to Friday group, and move them to a 4-10 schedule. We think that would be more efficient and more productive for each operator. You'd be getting everyone a 3-day weekend, except there's always 1 operator on call each week. They would obviously not have that 3-day weekend. Probably would expect to see a little bit of reduction in demand for PTO just in the summertime. And like I said, this is likely be a more productive work schedule for everyone. And then we'd also want to go back to that annual work plan to revisit PTO limits in terms of how many people you can allow off on a given day. Use that annual work plan to determine what your minimum staffing levels really are or should be throughout the year, but also to use that sort of consideration of need to allow people to have time off to make sure you're not overscheduling major projects at the same period of time. Another strategy could potentially be to plan for low power weeks around holidays. Assume you'll have more demand for PTO and make sure you're not trying to, have that week to exercise your valves in the water system. As we've talked, as I've mentioned a few times, the workloads have obviously increased over the last 6 years and operator staffing hasn't. As I mentioned, there's a lead operator. It's not a supervisory position, but it sort of is. It's at that kind of introductory supervisory position. If you consider the operators that he works with as his span of control, that's awfully high at 8, particularly at that sort of introductory level of supervision. Usually you see that more of a kind of a lead crew operator, and they see a crew of 4 or so. So we saw with the discussion of the water treatment plant, that will complicate the system that you currently operate. And we heard from some operators, because they only really, when they're on call, I should back up, they rotate their weeks on call. So if there are 9 operators, they're on call once every 9 weeks. If they're not on call, some of them don't really work with the treatment system at all. And so they don't feel terribly comfortable with it. They're just not around it and exposed to it to build up that sort of comfort and expertise. And if we end up hiring more operators, doing rounds will become less frequent for each operator. So now it's once every 2 months or so. You could add a couple of operators, and it's more like once every 3 months. Obviously, that's harder to train new operators, harder for people to retain knowledge, harder to gain a feel for the system, of which it's now becoming more complex. So our recommendation around staffing for the operators is to increase staffing by 2 operators and 1 lead operator. That second lead operator will help reduce the span of control for the lead operator position. Ideally, that second lead operator, if we split into those 2 work groups during the summer, that they would be assigned different work groups, the Monday to Thursday and a Tuesday to Friday. Given the budget season, the timing and all that, we would recommend aiming to fill 2 of those positions this year, prioritizing the lead operator and 1 of the operators, and then perhaps the following year, then add the second operator. As I mentioned, there's concern about familiarity and building up expertise within the treatment system among those that do rounds. There was a question that was posed to us as to whether or not the department should really split into a utility group and a non-utility group doing parks and streets. We prefer the flexibility that Public Works provides itself and able to move staff amongst those different functions, but recognizing that you don't want to have people not working or working very infrequently with the utility system. We would recommend designating about 6 operators as utility specialists. We would ideally limit these to the higher grades of operators. And so it would rotate amongst these 6 people. Each one would be on call once every 6 weeks. It would help build up and concentrate that expertise. It may require some incentivization to entice operators to take on that extra badge. There's a growing trend within the industry that people don't seek out overtime like they used to a few decades ago. And I think we're seeing that a little bit here as well. So there may be some either policy changes in terms of who gets called in for, say, snow removal first. It may have to come down to a slight modification of pay, but that will have to be a discussion amongst staff and perhaps the union. The city did recently lose an admin assistant who was working part-time for Public Works. There is substantial need for clerical work, for work that is currently done by the director and assistant director, that could be done by someone doing more administrative staff type tasks. Ideally, we'd like to aim high for someone in terms of skills, in terms of working with computers, being able to read a GIS map. We'd like to make the most use of their skills, particularly as they first come on. So I think it would behoove staff to help develop binders of SOPs to help them take on as many tasks as possible, because a lot of things that walk through the door probably aren't, an every day, every hour sort of thing. And we would recommend starting them somewhat partially at, in Public Works versus the general fund. And perhaps over time, if they can prove themselves more to Public Works, take on more roles, readjust that in the future. There is a question about what to do regarding auto repair and maintenance. So there is some light vehicle maintenance that's being done in the department, not by ASCE certified operator, mechanics, however. We would recommend that the city either hire a certified mechanic, which is unlikely to have the need for that amount of light duty maintenance, or to explore signing a service contract with a local vendor. Auto repair is not really a core function of Public Works. Having non-certified mechanics work on those cars, I think, can expose the city to some liability. And there are oftentimes cost advantages to signing those service contracts. The city's parks master plan calls for a parks director. It's very explicit, saying this is the highest priority, this needs to be done. However, it doesn't really give guidance on the role or the scope of the parks director position. We don't think the city is at a point where a separate parks department makes sense, and it's rare to have a parks director without a separate department or staff. So given that, we really think that the city should be intentional and bring some stakeholders together to collaborate as to the proper role and scope of what sort of position this parks director, or whatever it should be called, a parks manager, an assistant director for parks in the Public Works department, what that role should encompass. So we'd advise bringing together like the Parks Advisory Board, council, staff to help come to agreement as to what this sort of role should entail. We looked at technology in use in the department. City uses Beehive as an asset management system. It appears to be well implemented. However, it lacks a parks module. I'm told it's probably maybe $7,000 to add that in. It's not used as a work order system currently, nor do operators use it much in the field outside of as a GIS system. We would recommend that Beehive be implemented as a full computerized maintenance management system, or CMMS, for the department. Issue tablets for the operators in the field so they can receive work orders in the field. They can be issued work orders from the office. And it's also very important that they, training for Beehive, there'd be a proper investment made in that so everyone knows how to use it properly. But once you're issuing work orders, you can track the work that you're doing so much better. You'd be making the case for more operators in the future as you need it. We all get the technical training we need to do our jobs, but sometimes we're left to figure out the supervisory leadership training. We recommend that anyone in a supervisory role in the department be given access to leadership and supervisory training to help foster the soft skills necessary for their roles. And then finally, our last observation recommendation, there were some questions about safety. I think some of the stress and strain of trying to get work done and getting all of our service level targets met may sometimes come at the cost of staffing at in the safest manner. So our recommendation is to work to instill and sustain a culture of safety that involves here for us ensuring appropriate staffing for various activities, in developing SOPs and guidelines for safety that are mutually agreed upon by both staff and leadership as to how standard jobs get staffed. And then also provide appropriate channels so that unsafe activities can be reported. This will most likely be through HR, but removing that sort of reporting mechanism from outside the chain of command. And I realize I blitzed through that pretty quickly. We're last in the meeting perhaps, so, but we would love to have, if you have questions, want to have a conversation, discuss anything further, fire away.
So the amount of FTE in 2019 was 131 accounts per FTE, and then we added another operator. How many accounts per FTE would you recommend?
That's a good question, and that is also a trick question. So we do a lot of benchmarking. In fact, I do almost all of the benchmarking for our company. And we get a variation of that question. How do we compare based on common benchmark metrics?
Right.
And first, I'll also say too, the way we technically calculated that is not quite the way that you normally do it, because here we use public works FTEs. Normally, you're looking at sewer accounts per sewer FTEs. So it's kind of diluting that number. But the real answer to your question is we never recommend the number of FTEs based on an artificial metric, or not an artificial metric, but a calculated metric of accounts per employee. It can provide a guideline. It can tell you when you're kind of outside of the norms of industry. But really what is more important is asking what are our service level targets, and are we able to meet them with our current staffing? So some of your service level targets in the sewer system are things like jetting all of the lines every, I think, 3 or 4 years. I think 1/3 or 1/4 of the city is jetted each year. If you're not doing that, you're probably short on staff. With the Public Works Department, it's a little bit fuzzier because they're doing 3 other things too, right? They're handling parks and streets and water. So we have to look at the organization as a whole. But I put that slide in there to show you that, you know what, this workload demand has grown per employee by quite a bit. But it's not something where we would ever take a number and say, now you're at the right number of accounts per FTE.
And another question about the 4-day work week.
Yeah.
What would be your recommendation for choosing who gets the Monday through Thursday and who gets the Tuesday through Friday? Or would there be some type of rotation?
You know, I thought about this. I don't know, you know, would guys want to be able to swap back and forth so long as they're working 4 days in 1 week? If 1 week they're on a Monday to Thursday and the next week they're on Tuesday to Friday, and then they've got themselves a 4-day weekend, right? If that works. But then they'd have to follow that up with a 2-day weekend. I don't think there's an explicit recommendation from our perspective. I think that's going to have to be settling down with staff.
Yep.
I don't, one of the things I didn't really see with the union here and with the operators was a real sense of seniority, where guys are saying, I'm here first because I've been here longest. I don't know if that's something they'd want to do, or if people even have a preference.
Got it. Thank you.
So in your proposal in task 3, you specifically said you're going to benchmark Lake Elmo against peer communities and national benchmarks. There's not a benchmark in the study anywhere to be found.
We removed some of those benchmarks because, one, like I said, we don't want to go to compare public works departments to other public works departments because they're just too disparate in terms of what they do. We also don't know we also don't compare well with levels of service. For instance, your utility system has just sewer conveyance, and because it's just groundwater currently, a very simple treatment system. And so unless you find particularly two utilities that are doing exactly the same thing, as well as a park system of roughly the same size, providing the same services, you don't really learn much from that. Now, we did, I don't know if we have we do have the full slides here. I'll show you one way we can, is it showing there?
Yeah, we did not get those.
Yeah.
They're in the report.
So no, I don't know
Not
that
mine.
this one is in the report. We did some other comparisons with, in this case, these are national benchmarks. This is sewer customer accounts per allocated sewer FTE. In your audited financial report, in the statistical section in the back, it allocates the number of FTEs in sewer and in water, parks each year. We took those allocated sewer FTEs and did just that with the data we had available, sewer accounts per allocated sewer FTE. Now, we didn't include this in the report or the presentation before because we don't know the basis of that allocation at the end of the day. It's hard for us to really vouch for that number as being consistently determined each year. But if we do that, and this number of sewer customer accounts per allocated sewer FTE we would do in the industry, it's just sewer customer accounts per sewer FTE, or sewer employee. We see that obviously it starts very low in 2012 and 2013 because you had very few accounts. There's only like 30 accounts in 2013. I think you allocated like, 0.9, 0.7 FTEs in 2013. To now, when it goes up to, in 2021, it was 1,845 accounts per FTE, which means you're only allocating, probably off the top of my head, 1.5 FTEs for the year. These horizontal lines going across are the AWWA benchmark survey results. They do a benchmark survey each year. This is from their 2023 survey. They report values for the 75th percentile, median, and 25th percentile. As you can see, for the last few years, we've been way beyond the 75th percentile. But because this is a sewer conveyance only utility, I don't think that it tells you much. Most of those respondents are probably conveyance and treatment, frankly.
Excuse me, I'm confused. So these are you're saying the city of Lake Elmo currently has 1,304 accounts per FTE, sewer FTE?
Per allocated as of 2023. So if you look in the ACFR, in the very back, there's a statistical section, and it lists the number of FTEs that are allocated for various functions. It
Where is
bounces
that
around-
located? I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it in the report.
The ACFR?
In the ACFR?
Yeah.
So
Sorry.
using those allocations?
Those allocations, right.
Okay, we don't know if they're right or wrong.
Well, I don't know if they're right or wrong, but they fluctuate each year a little bit. So if you were to look between 2021 and 2022, I think they allocated more FTEs that year. Do I know the basis of that? Do I know that that's based on doing more work in the sewer system that year? I don't. And so when we do this based on an allocated FTE, I think it really muddies whatever message you might draw from it. So we did not include these particular charts in the report, but we did look at them.
So in essence, there's no benchmarking done?
There was benchmarking done. Does it tell you anything meaningful that I think would drive the recommendations that we're giving you? No, I don't think it does.
So when you recommend that we should add 3 operators?
That's
and-
based
and-
on trying to meet levels of service.
But based on what? If they're not benchmarked to anything, like, for instance, we may come back and say, in the city of Lake Elmo, we have 90 miles of streets. So it would take 4 FTEs to maintain 90 miles of streets. I'm just making a number up, okay? And we have 50 miles of sewer. And if you compare that to national and peer cities, it would take 3 FTEs to maintain 50 miles of sewers. You go through each of the functions, you could then total them up and say, well, in the city, you should have 18 FTEs in your public works department based on benchmark averages to maintain your assets.
We never, ever go based on a formula like that.
But
It-
then how do you know how many we need? You said we should add a mechanic, okay? Is one mechanic sufficient to maintain the number and type of equipment we have,
I know,
based on what
I-
analysis?
I did not say you should add you said either hire a mechanic in order to do work that is done by a certified.
Either hire a mechanic or go out for a contract.
Yeah.
Okay, so if the option is to hire a mechanic, is one enough? Is one too many, based on the number and type of equipment we're maintaining?
No, I don't think if you're hiring someone for a light duty, maintenance, I don't think you have enough vehicles to keep them busy.
It's just hard to have confidence in numbers that aren't backed by any type of measure of the workload.
Again, when we benchmark, it is always descriptive, not prescriptive.
Well, I just, I think that was part of the proposal that you made, it was in the cost, we didn't get any benchmarking in the study at all. There's no basis for adding positions based on any measurable workload functions, it's just we think you should add 3, we should either have a mechanic or contract it out, but, based on what? One mechanic enough? Is one too few? Is one too many? Based on equipment age and type, vehicle equivalent units and maintenance repair units. Very simple, but there's none of that in there. So how do you have confidence in a report that recommends hiring people that has no basis for the hiring other than we think you should?
I think what we've discussed or discovered in our interviews with staff is that the way in which they are doing their jobs, the way in which leadership believes that they need more people to be able to get the work done. When we look at the number of, the span of control of the lead operator, we believe that at the very least, another lead operator and another operator is justified. Now, the other advantage to say, waiting on that second new operator is you can determine whether or not you feel like you need that position. But again, as I mentioned, again, we go for levels of service. And can the work get done in a safe, effective, and efficient manner? And when operators feel like they can no longer take time off because people have to be here, then we have to question whether or not there are enough people around to do the work that's being asked of them.
So I guess I'll ask in a different way then, in terms of the service levels. Because I operate in the public sector and I operate based upon service level agreements. What are some of the service levels that are not being met in terms of expectations?
I think right now, if you'll go back to a very early slide, those service level expectations are being met, but they're oftentimes being met with fewer people on a task than it would take to do it safely. So 2 people instead of 3 if you're operating a wood chipper, for instance, or guys feeling rushed and entering confined spaces when they shouldn't. So based on that, based on the amount of growth that has happened since 2019, the last time an operator was added, it's our feeling that adding these additional operators or lead operator is warranted.
Because I subjectively believe that there's a need for additional labor. I was presuming that in this audit, we were going to get the objective.
You want to?
No, I just figured that, yeah. I think, if you'd like a really good example, you might look at this slide right here. If this is what you're sort of looking for. My take, just for the record, I used to be in utilities, I ran them, or was in this space for the majority of my own career. The issue with benchmarking is, typically speaking, you're looking for something to the effect of, can we do what we are asked to do by our public in an efficient and an effective manner. What I see when I look at these numbers is exactly what I think I hear you're saying, which is, well, from the trend analysis, we're adding a lot more people and customers to our service delivery profile in sewer right now than we were, what's that, 5 years ago? Given the projections of growth in your community going forward, given what you're going to be asked to do, you're adding new treatment facilities, you're gonna have, from what I saw tonight, you're going to have new water lines, you're gonna have more roads, you're going to have more things that are going to impact that delivery of service and that scope of service. You're going to need more staff to be able to accomplish that. And that seems to me to be proven out, at least in this number, and all the other numbers that are in the report. Everything that we saw said that you're growing in your service profile and what you need to be delivering. That's the reason we didn't say add 10 people, because if I just looked at this number, I could probably justify that based just on one number. The idea, though, is to look at the ecosystem of what you're trying to do back to service level. Service level is essentially, level of service is, what am I trying to do relative to the resources I have in my availability? I'll use the mechanic. You don't have to add a mechanic. It doesn't take a benchmark to say that. However, if you choose to, the reason you would choose to is not based on a benchmark. Would you like to incur the risk of having someone work on your vehicles, your equipment, who is not certified, and then puts your city at a higher level of risk, such as it is? What we say in the report is, you don't necessarily need to add a mechanic. You should look at other options besides this if you don't want to incur the risk. So the answer is, benchmarking is a part of the analysis, but it's not the whole of the analysis. If I compare you only to Minneapolis or some other place, I'm not necessarily getting the whole picture. And what we decided as we went through the study was, what we see, and you see this a lot in growing communities, is that your community is growing by all indicators that we can see from a service level profile at a faster rate than your staff is growing. So therefore, it's a pretty simple equation. And that's also why we recommended things like, hey, maybe do 2 1 year, see how that works, and then if you need to add more staff, use it in that, but use it in the context of what you're trying to do as a community. And everything that we could see sort of spoke to that.
So when you look at like this slide with the sewer FT, and you took the FTs from the ACFR, okay? Wouldn't it have made sense to have the employees fill out a time spent profile? How much time do you, as employees, spend on sewers? And you could then come back and say, well, the ACFR says 1.95, but the employees tell us they actually we have 4.2 FTEs. And then you'd have a more accurate measure of how many sewer FTEs you have per account than something out of an ACFR that no one knows where the number came from.
That's why we also suggested that they implement Beehive as a CMMS to better record the activities that they're actually doing.
Before you add more staff. Every indicator right now says you need to add more staff. If you want to add more staff after that, you can add more accordingly using that information.
All right, so Beehive, let's talk about Beehive. Let's talk about then some of the recommendations. So Beehive, what do we need for that process? What I was hearing was the software exists, but it's essentially a tablet Kindle thing doohickey for each person, training obviously, and then probably some management thereof.
Right, so we've already taken, and we moved fairly fast with some of the recommendations they've been giving. You know, the annual plan, we've kind of implementing that already. Beehive, Adam and I have already implemented our task work order system through that, and we're using it the best we can right now with the time that we have, but we are training staff to enter and do completion. That'll obviously help us track what's not getting done and the number of tasks. Our time card system does track the amount of time that we spend in each area, sewer, water, storm sewer, and streets. But Beehive, we are moving forward with that as fast as we can, and that would include next year a park module, which then we can put park tasks, assets in there, work orders, everything would be assigned to parks.
That was like an add-on within the software.
It's a layer, correct? Yep.
So at this point, there wasn't a need for a budget allocation.
Not to do what we're improving right now, no.
And then in terms of, I guess I'll ask the question then, 410s, 2 shifts, do you see that as something that you can, within the department, do without consternation or divide or, well, I wanted the Tuesday through Friday, well, I wanted, or is that something that can reasonably be, 'cause summer's already here, so that would be a pretty quick turnaround.
Right, yeah, I think we're gonna need some buy-in, or I suggest we get buy-in from staff to make sure they wanna work the 410s. It would be in the department's best interest, because we do eliminate a lot of those interruptions with the breaks and coming back to the shop, taking break, and then, you know. So the 4.9s and a 4 are tremendous as far as increasing production, and I know the 410s would even be better yet. If we get buy-in from staff, I think that's something we can implement once we add new staff. Because right now we have 6 staff members showing up every day. And if I was to split that team, we would have 3 on Monday, 3 on Friday. Somebody calls in sick, I can't operate with 2 staff members. So I would not recommend to implement that until after I add additional staff.
I just want to add too, this has been a great team working together, and also with Adam too. And so part of Marty and Adam, while they're working on implementing the work orders at Beehive, is also us learning what type of data we should be collecting in order to make those educated decisions and to back it up going forward. So, and also doing more research with other cities to make it, you know, right now, are we gonna be tracking everything? It becomes administratively cumbersome. What should we be focusing on? There's a gamut of, you know, cities are recording data differently on a span. So Marty and his team continue to look into that, and this is brand new for the work orders.
That would have been good information in here too. Sorry, I'm gonna go back to the discussion. I know you're trying to move on from it.
Yes, I was.
Sorry, bringing it back up for you guys. I'll just give my 2 cents on that. I agree. I guess it is a little frustrating to be lacking some of the objective benchmarks, you know, especially if that was in the proposal, if that's something that we were asking for at the presentation. And I think it is worth having. You know, I'll go back to example of we recently conducted a parks study, and there was benchmarks in that. And I 100% agree with your point of sometimes these benchmarks can completely muddy the water, right?
Yes.
You see, you know, on average, cities have 1 horse polo field. It's like, well, do we need a horse polo? Is there any interest in horse polo fields here? And there's a high interest of lacrosse and baseball and soccer here, and maybe we're underserved relative to that. So I get that benchmarks can't be the end-all be-all, but I do think that they do give you at least an idea of where we need to be. And so I think that's a really reasonable request to get some more information on that, especially if that was part of, you know, what we were asking for.
And it was.
To get a little bit more information, not that makes the decision for us, but at least it gives us some guidance. And, you know, if it says we need to hire, based off these benchmarks, 10 more people, well, we're probably not gonna hire 10 more people next year. We're still gonna start with like what you guys said. We're gonna get Beehive going, we're gonna get a better idea of where the resources are going, get a better idea of, well, okay, where do we actually need to get people first? Like you said, they're getting this stuff done in not a sustainable way long-term. But the benchmarks, again, at least give us a rough idea if we're in the ballpark or if we're not. And I personally would prefer to, not that it's gonna make the decision, I still think it's good objective data to have, and I agree that there's a lot of great information that came from this, but again, I think that is one of the big things when we're having this done, is like, you guys are experts in this area, and you're gonna be able to access those benchmarks and understand it, where we might be missing those.
Right, so let's just talk about this since it's up here, and it's a good one. You know, in 2023, 1,304 accounts per FTE, and that is way beyond the 75th percentile that AWWA surveyed.
Correct.
Of 600 accounts. So we could, keep in mind, well, we could bring you in line with the 75th percentile. It would be more leanly staffed than 25%, than 75% of all sewer utilities.
Except we don't know that the FTE from the aquifer is an accurate FTE dedicated to sewer. It just, we
But
have
it's
no
the-
way of knowing that.
But it's
They, they could have put 500 in there. I mean, the number they grabbed, nobody knows where it came from, or how they got to it, or if it's accurate.
So
So
for
it's a
Beehive.
that's a meaningless measure.
No, I don't think that came from Beehive. Because those allocations have been going back since
I just
well
think-
before Beehive existed.
I just think that we do need more staff. I don't disagree with that. I really believe that in my heart. I'd like to see a more subjective analysis why we need 3. The mechanic issue, I think we shouldn't have unqualified people servicing equipment, I agree. But again, is one mechanic enough? I don't know, if the church hire one mechanic or contract out, well, if one mechanic isn't sufficient, we're still not gonna be in the right position. And so that's where I'm coming from. I ran public works departments too for 20 years. I have a little bit of understanding, I'm a professional engineer, I have a little bit of understanding of this, and I actually did staffing studies for 22 years. So we all have different approaches to get there. I just was hoping that if it says add 3 because, you don't have enough staff to maintain this asset, and, most people, your peer communities use 5 people per measure, and you only have 3. And so, but none of that was there. And so it just makes it harder to go back to the public and say, well, we need to add 3 people. Well, why? We already started by saying we're meeting all of our service, we're flushing our sewers, we're operating our valves and all that. So one might say, well, if you're doing all that now, why do you need more people? I recognize we have the PTO issue, which is, telling us we're stressing our people. That would be an argument. But it'd be nice to say that, your department should be staffed at 22 to, to be doing everything you're doing and have your staff be able to take their time off and all that. There's just no analytical metric that leads us there.
First of all, appreciate all of that. I definitely see your perspective too, and I don't want to act like it's not something. I think the thing that we sort of back to your point as well. You have to make choices when you do these studies, right? And one of the things that we noted was, and I want to get to the 3 FTEs. I use that one as an example. So if we were to look for your peer communities, some communities do, like Lake Elmo, their staff does it all. Brian mentioned it. Most of the utilities that you'd be benchmarking against, for example, using utilities as your example, they have separate departments that do the same work that point whatever it is in the AFCR is in your staff. So one of the things that we sort of split the difference, you might say. We said, okay, we don't have enough information to say exactly you need, to your point, 4, 2, 9, 18 on every one of the services that you do. But what we do see is every one of the, at least the percentage and the metrics that we did look at, which is, do you have growth in your community against all of your asset classes? The answer to that is yes, you do. Number 1. So that is driven totally by quantitative analysis. Number 2, based on that, and then based on the fact that you are growing, continuing to grow, and you're going to grow, okay, what then should you be able to do, or should you do based on your level of service? The answer is, we're going to continue to do what we're doing right now, then you at least need to add some level of staff. Our thought was 3, based on what we saw. So that's, again, that is quantitative in nature. And then finally, I would say, is I think we feel we're a little less aggressive as a firm. We typically, Brian and I do these all over the country. If we don't know, what we say is get the information so you can make the best choice to get yourself to where you need to be staffing wise. And the way to do that is through things like Beehive, to do things like, to really look at that and then evaluate your level of service to say, this is what we actually need. Does that make sense? Hopefully that
Yeah.
makes sense as a
I mean,
relationship.
are the benchmarks available? Is that something that you guys
Yeah.
have access
Well,
to?
so those three horizontal lines though.
Yeah.
Those are the national benchmarks. Those
Okay.
are the surveyed samples.
And so Marty will have access to all of these.
Marty has access to
benchmarks.
these.
Got all of it, yeah.
All of these charts are here in we call them our hip pocket slides, in the back of the presentation. Again, we didn't put them up in the front part of the presentation or include them in the report, actually, because we don't think they really enlighten anything. And, I mean, other than the fact that, service demands are increasing. But again, we don't want to use some sort of formula to determine what sort of staffing. And if I could use two examples. I recently worked for a small city in Missouri, smaller than Lake Elmo. They have 30-something lift stations. Well, you could say, well, we should benchmark on the number of lift stations. You could use that to help determine what your staffing should be. My first client doing one of these projects was the city and county of Denver. Probably familiar with how large of a city that is. They have 3 lift stations. So you've got to be very careful about, the work, what you perceive as work demands based on just some formula. The other example I'll give, and we were talking about this with Nicole and Marty recently, there was a city near where I'm from, city of 10,000, so close to Lake Elmo size. They have a parks department. They have 5 full-time staff, 6 part-time staff, and 44 seasonal staff. Well, Lake Elmo doesn't have any parks department. They have, in the last, I think, two or 3 years, been allocated between 1 and 2 FTEs. What's the difference? The difference is levels of service. They're running a youth center with community meeting rooms. They've got a lake with a swimming beach and a campground. It's all about the levels of service that are being provided. We would not tell you, because you're larger than them, that you need to hire 5 full-time staff, 6 part-time staff, and 44 seasonal staff for your parks facilities. Nor are we even really able to, particularly when it comes to parks, say that parks in and of themselves are understaffed right now, because there's no data to really, that exists, that backs that up. There's not an allocation of parks employees per acre that you should take to then decide staffing necessarily.
So I guess I'm confused with, back to my first question about how many accounts per FTE would you recommend? And you said it was a trick question.
Yeah.
But you keep pointing to this graph, saying that the graph has gone up, and I agree that we do need somebody else, but there's no quantitative data of saying it needs to reduce by X% to make it viable for the city. It's more of just like it feels like, trust me, we need 3.
At the end of the day, I think you can say, trust me, you need 2, see how that's working for you, see the rate of growth, and then you're probably, our honest guess is that you need a 3rd.
So you
but-
just said that there is no quantitative data, it is just, trust me, we need 2.
Based on our discussions with staff at all levels and the things that they're trying to do, I mean, we could tell you, yeah, go meet the 75th percentile. You'll be more efficient than 75% of, or more lightly staffed than 75% of utilities out there. You would basically need to more than double your allocated sewer FTEs to meet that. Do I think that's what you need?
Because we don't know
No.
that the FTE counts in that ACFR are accurate. They will keep going back to, took a number out of the ACFR that nobody knows where it came from or how accurate it is, and divided it. You might as well have said, there are 3 dogs in the street and 2 have a bone, so let's use the 2 that have the bone. It's just, that's a completely useless number, because we don't know that allocation is accurate and reflects the actual effort in the sewer. We could have found that out by surveying the employees and their time spent, but we chose not to do that.
I think two things on that, if I could. Number one, okay, let's say we double the staffing number at what's in the ACFR, okay, as a point of reference, okay? It wouldn't change the trend analysis in any one of, the only thing it would do is it may change, it may adjust your sewer number down, put customers' accounts per allocated FT down slightly. It may change the nature of the metrics, but it wouldn't change the recommendation. The recommendation still is that you would be understaffed relative to the level of service you keep trying to provide. And whether or not the number is 100% accurate, look at this trend, sir. I don't know what to tell you other than to say, if you're discounting the ACFR number in 2023, you also have to discount the ACFR number in 2012,
I agree.
13, 14, and
Because they're
15.
pulled out of the air. And the other thing is,
So what is the number telling us, is
hold it
what I'm
back up.
saying.
But the other number that the AWA was using is all of the employees in the sewer department, the billing, the managers, the accounting and finance. You're taking 2 from just one public works department. So you're not using the total number of employees dedicated to sewer. You're using the 2 employees dedicated from public works. What about the billing staff? What
I
about the
believe
management
that-
staff?
I
That's not
believe-
included in the ACFR number. That's public works. Go back to the chart, that's public works.
No, these are allocated sewer, so they're FTEs allocated to sewer and water, and if you add up all the FTEs allocated to sewer, water, streets, parks, I believe it will total more employees than you have in public works. Because they are allocating some billing and/or finance.
That's typically how it's done.
Yeah.
Marty, do you feel like do you feel like this is enough, if you know what the 75th percentile is, that, it's around 650 allocated, or 650 accounts per FTE for sewer? Does that help you enough when you're assigning the operators what they need to be doing, when you're trying to staff, when you're trying to figure out the schedules? Like, if you have these benchmarks, does that provide you with enough to be moving forward? And yeah, of course, like, Beehive is gonna get operating, and we're gonna get better data and truly understand how many FTEs are being allocated to each of these things.
You know, how long is this information or the recommendation good for? 5 years, and then we kind of relook at it after that? That's kind of my bigger question in the back of my head is, is 3 recommendation or 3 FTEs? Is that gonna get us until 2027? And then,
So is your concern that it's not enough?
with the growth, the projected growth that we're gonna have, I have some concerns with.
That's where benchmarks could come in nice, because then we'd have an idea of,
It would, I kind of agree, it would just, give us another option to look at and kind of compare to. Now, are our service level expectations different? I think they are,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if we get another council in 2 years, they might really want to focus hard on parks, right? And they want the best of the best in every park for service and ball fields, lined and obviously things are gonna change drastically. Right now, parks are being maintained as a recreation more than probably anything. So there's variables.
Just some things that I learned too from Marty is that you do have some, service levels that you do track for like time that takes to complete a, full snow removal. And so with streets added and service levels change, you are already able to gauge how many employees you would need to cover that. So we do have some data, but what I learned through this whole process is that we need to collect more data and we need to be consistently collecting it to to tell the story as we continue to grow. And then Marty does have these service levels in place, which are currently being met. But that would be another tipping point, is if things start to not be able to be met. That's something that would tell us we need to look at additional staff.
I think maybe a good thing moving forward, because I think we've beat the horse pretty good on this.
Yeah.
With those service level expectations, because again, snow removal is one. Removal of trash at parks, like there are so many things that, and we don't know what the timeframes are for any of those. But maybe we're getting, for the, here's a list of tasks, Marty. Here's a whole list of things to add to the pile because you're not busy enough already. But some of that, those agreements, those understandings, what is being met, and then what do we know is going to be changing coming up that's going to be impacting that? Because that's another data point. We know there will be this many additional homes built in the next 2 years because there's already permits or there's already plats. We know that there's an additional park going here now next to Sunfish Lake on the east side. Like things that we know that are going to be impacting those service levels, the additional mileage of road, the additional water lines, the additional sewer lines. Those are things we have internally, but I also don't want to ask for it because that's additional time and that 0.5 is missing. But I don't think I don't know if there's another set of questions that we can ask for the two of you who have come here for this. So I appreciate you obviously flew in. I don't know if there's any value gain for us to continue to have this discussion with Raftellus, but.
Well, just one thing, we have all that data, and we did upload it, so we do
We
have
get it?
We did all, community development, all the growth projections that have been done, that they worked on for the water usage. We have
Yep.
all that. We have so much data that we collected. I mean, we all pooled together and,
Yep.
got as much in there. I don't have the whole repository list, but.
I mean, Nick needs 1,000 pages to entertain himself, but, because again, I don't want to have this be an additional task for staff. This is why we hired a consultant to do this. But on the flip side, as we move forward, so the Beehive thing, awesome to hear that's already being done. I fully agree, the 4x10s, we all know a 10-hour workday, you can get more done with 40 hours in 10-hour sections than 5x8s. That's obvious. You're on the job site, you're able to do things more when you have that long amount. I get it. Access to leadership resources training for all the leaders in the department, yes. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the resources are within your area of licensure, within the League of Minnesota Cities, whoever it is. I don't know what that looks like. Fully agree. I think should be the case no matter what for every one of our leaders. But I think we need to have that discussion, especially once the mayor is back, as to the process, because this is about not only just the potential of 3.5 FTEs, it's also then that discussion for what a parks director does or does not look like in that community conversation. We haven't even talked about that. Like, it's in our parks plan, but how do we get that ball rolling to discuss that and analyze that? So I mean, this might be another work session topic.
Sorry to interrupt, but we had discussed that exactly as something that was missing from that Parks Master Plan was, and I asked this question too, is what was important that we're not currently providing, that the Parks Commission feels that we're missing, and maybe it's, guessing service levels. So we can have that discussion with Parks Commission and council, and then council ultimately can decide, and so that was part of what was not in the Parks Master Plan.
Yeah.
So exactly, I agree that, and we talked about scheduling a workshop for Parks Commission and council at a later date to discuss that.
Do you have enough feedback from us for next steps, for any actionable things in terms of, obviously Beehive is rolling, leadership opportunities, that conversation about 4x10s, but as you said, you can't do that until there's additional FTEs anyways. So I think maybe the next conversation is we need to talk as a council, how do we, if we do, move forward on FTEs? Does that sound like a plan? And it's just a report discussing that. We get access to the data, as much of it as possible so we can at least add more perspective to that conversation.
Yes, keep the ball rolling.
All
I think
right.
a lot of the observations are gonna be resolved by, addressing the underlying issue of not enough FTE.
Sounds good. Thank you for coming to Lake Elmo.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. U of M test seed plot.
Is our U of M member out there yet?
Oh,
No?
I don't see him.
He was walking around up there.
It's the worst study I've ever seen. Hate these things go.
Good evening, council. Gary Dieters is with the U of M and is interested in proposing a research test plot for low-input grass seed, multiple different species. And the one location that interests him that could potentially be available is the new water tower down on Hudson and Lake Elmo. I can let him go through the slides and then I can kind of help answer questions from there.
All right, hey, thanks.
Thanks for having me. Gary Dieters, I work for the University of Minnesota. I'm the lawn water conservation educator. And you can see on the slide there that we work with the Met Council and we have a grant from them that's basically water conservation. And part of this study is through their grant, and it's establishing low input mixtures, and I'll go through that. And so the introduction is, we know that lawn seed is available, and we know that there are good mixtures out there, but residents have a hard time finding them. We know that too much Kentucky bluegrass is used in sod because it's so easily available, but it requires a lot of water to look good. And there are also significant barriers to using the most well-adapted grass seed in the Twin Cities. So why are there barriers is because of expectations. People like a lush green lawn, but it requires a lot of water, and that's the Kentucky bluegrass. In order for it to look good, it needs water and fertilizer. People are just resistant to change. They just don't want to change. They just do what they want to do, which is fine. Availability, so again, the easy access to the sod, and then the limited retail presence of the low input drought tolerant mixtures. And then just the lack of public awareness from homeowners who might not know what the benefits are of these low input turf grasses. And so the project overview, the plan is we're gonna establish multi-species turf grasses at 4 metro sites in the Twin Cities this summer. Cultivars are for each species are selected based on relevant performance tests, basically data that has been performed over the years. And then we will work with the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources, Bowser, and turfgrass seed vendors to develop a process to recommend the best seed, best lawns to recommend the best lawn water conservation species mixtures to the Twin Cities. And then seed vendors will be able to use approved cultivars to fulfill the mixture requirements. So the benefits to Lake Elmo and the Twin Cities, so homeowners will be more easily available to access better turfgrass mixtures for their lawns. So like right now, I speak to thousands of people a year, and we tell, they visit our site or they visit the State Fair booth, and they're like, this low input turf is great. This is awesome. Well, where do I get it? And, we're not really supposed to say, like, well, go to this place to get, to get this seed, because just
university we're not really supposed to do that. And just trying to find these mixtures, when a homeowner who has no idea what to buy, they'll go to the store, they'll go to the big box stores. They don't know what to get, and so they buy poor turf varieties or cultivars, perennial ryegrass, which usually doesn't survive winters and summers. And so it's just a battle. And so being able to say, go to so-and-so, they carry this seed load, this drought tolerant mixture. And we're hoping to have like places all over the Twin Cities that we can tell people to go get these mixtures. So that's what the overall goal is. So, and then cities could recommend new lawns only use these mixtures. Now, of course, that would be, a decision for each city. But knowing that these would exist, cities would say, you can only, if you have a new lawn, you can't use just Kentucky bluegrass sod, you must use this mixture. So possibly, that's something that we'll get there, eventually, maybe. But it's similar to what the U of M research has done with MnDOT, where that has led to roadside turfgrass seed mixture recommendations. So establishing the site, we would pay for the water, the hookups, whatever is needed for the fire hydrant conversion, using a seeding blanket to help hold moisture and increase establishment rate and prevent washouts. And so you can see in the photo there, that's what a seeding blanket looks like. It's basically just erosion control. You see them in ditches, roadsides where they're doing construction. And then mowing and maintenance. And then, again, we would try to, we would talk about like maybe the city takes it over after like that first establishment year. How will the site get watered? So you can kind of see the pipes there. It's this modular system that we have developed. And it would be complete with a rain sensor, MP rotors, which are EPA water sense approved, which use lower water. It's a lower water use nozzle. Water several times a day for the initial establishment for optimum seed germination. And then once it's established, like this year, after this year, 26 and 27, there will be no water used. And that's part of discovering which are the best mixtures. So if we go through some drought, you're gonna see these species performing or better than others because they're more drought tolerant. And so establishing the research site for the drought tolerant turfgrass mixtures, we mentioned the water tower. There's access to the site for public viewing if needed, access to water to establish the plots. Lake Elmo is a city with water concerns, so it would be good to demonstrate the most well-adapted turf grasses. So kind of the timeline of events, of course, this is with access agreement approved. So year one, kind of the fall, late summer, early fall, establish the turfgrass mixture plots. So like around August 15th, around that time. And then year two is just maintenance and data collection. Year three is maintenance and data collection. And then 28 and beyond, you either, we could return it to the original site or you keep it going for just further discovery. So challenges, watering restrictions, and the need for the extension. So like we're requesting the waiver to water the new seed beyond the initial 15 days because establishing a lawn from seed often requires more than 15 days because not all seed germinates at the same speed. It could lead to a failure due to lack of water on a hot windy day like today. If there isn't water being put down on new seed, even earlier this week, it's probably gonna fail. You got seedlings, their roots are like this. So all that work, it fails. So I can see like homeowners having a lot of difficulty establishing a lawn from seed with the watering restrictions. And I get it, I see a lot of watering restrictions throughout the Twin Cities. There are a lot of different ones. Yours is very strict, which is what the city decided to do. So
Once the site is established, no irrigation will be used at all. So if desired, we could use signage, and I just threw that together, that sign. So we could post signage explaining the project to the public and create a landing page for homeowners to learn about drought-tolerant grasses and water conservation. And then the expected outcomes, this is what we see, the expected outcomes of because of the research. Water conservation, so overall less water used with the new mixtures. Cost savings for residents and like city infrastructure because less water is potentially being used. The environmental impact of less watering, less runoff and pollution. The aesthetic appeal, so attractive lawns with less water. I already know like tall fescue grass looks fantastic, very drought tolerant, but most people don't know about it. So it's just trying to discover these turf grasses for people. And then educational value, so opportunities for community education on using low input turf. So like that photo there, what you see, that's a tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass mixture study, and it's amazing to see how well like the low input turf tall fescue does compared to Kentucky bluegrass. Way less water. So I do have like a breakdown of what the plot would look like. I have some more handouts. And so basically, like the water use for the research area, what we propose, and you know, this is totally up to you if you even want to do it, because I get it, water, you put these restrictions in place for residents to not use water, and we're proposing 10 minutes at like 7 a.m., 10 a.m., 1 p.m., 4 p.m., 7 p.m. And with the nozzles that we use, it's like 12 gallons a minute for 10 minutes. So basically 120 gallons per watering event. So in a day, you're gonna use about 600 gallons. But we would evaluate, we would adjust, so, you know, we don't know how well the soil takes in water or whatnot, so then you're thinking, well, maybe we could go down to 5 minutes is enough to water, you know, this is all the deeper we wanna go is like that 1/4 inch, just to make sure that seeding areas remains moist and we're protecting the newly developing grasses, you know, like the roots, cause there's nothing there. So on a day like today, like I said, with no water from probably noon to 5 o'clock, it would fry. I've seen lots of failures because of that. So, you know, I know that the Met Council is very interested in this. They've given, like, you know, the water rebate program with Lake Elmo. I know that exists because of the Met Council, and they're very excited about this. Just for the Twin Cities Metro. And so we're just looking to see if you can work with us so that we can try to establish this turf, because without the extra watering that we propose, we probably can't do the research, because we know it will fail when you're trying to water and establish turf mid to late August. And so, any questions?
I have a couple questions. Can you explain more about how homeowners will be more easily able to access the better turf?
Yep. So what the hope is, following the research, we work with Bowser and we go to the seed vendors and we create through the research and through the, like, seeing the research and like specific mixtures that, so we have the super drought tolerant species, or like best shade mixture, that we can, and the city can say, these are the mixtures
and you can go find them here. You can advertise where to buy these mixtures because they're gonna be state approved. So, it's not like, I mean, it's, the availability will be there for anyone to go purchase these mixtures, and they'll know what mixtures to buy, because it's
And we
gonna
still
be.
don't know where that would be sold.
No, it's one of those things like,
Okay.
the seed vendors around the Twin Cities, like, and I'm just gonna throw some names out there that are seed vendors, like Twin City Seed, Reinders, Gertens. I mean, they'll be able to go to any of these places that want to carry these mixtures.
Got it.
Yep.
And I think another question slash comment is, would it be a bad look with such strict watering policies here every day? They're seeing this lush lawn get watered and they can't water their lawn more than twice
Yep.
a week.
Understandable, and you know, like that amount of watering would probably be like 15 days, you know, for that initial establishment. And then we get into September where it's cooler, the nights are longer, the days are shorter, where that window of water need is gonna be less, so.
But you're still watering every day,
But we're
right?
still probably watering every day
Right.
unless it rains, you know, of course. And that is probably the one holdup, you know, with, is it a bad look if the residents aren't allowed to use water? I guess, but, you know, for the sake of research and learning these things, you know, and that's where the communication would
Right.
come into play. And so, that's where, you know, when we was talking to Marty and Nicole about the water restrictions, we're like, me and my fellow researcher were like, whoa, that's very strict. And, I think we knew that this was probably gonna be trouble, potentially, if you go through with it. But, you know, if you want something done, you have to do it this way. Like for us, I guess, because we know it will fail if it doesn't get that much water.
So what is the benefit of having it in Lake Elmo, since it would be a state-approved seed recipe, so to speak? Couldn't somebody from Oakdale take
Sure.
advantage of all the study and all the water that was used?
Absolutely, it could. The reason, like we were approached from Greg Johnson from the Met Council, who approached Nicole about
Yeah.
trying to get this study here in Lake Elmo. So then Nicole reached out to us
Got
about
it.
trying to get it, and
Okay.
that's kind of where
Understood.
where the connection was.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep.
And Marty, I presume on your end, since we're at this stage, the water tower site, from Public Works perspective, you're good to go.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of that. It'd be a decent site. The grass isn't superly well established there yet. It's fairly new, so I have no issues with that.
What, for that specific spot, was there right now like long fescue that was on a net, or is it still open dirt?
No, it was hydro-seeded, so I can't tell you the seed mix that the contractor put down. It's a standard mix that we use for construction, but
Did we put down a topsoil underneath that?
there's black dirt, correct?
Alright.
Yeah. Yep.
And I guess on my end, I have, so because we allow hand watering any day at all times for flowers, and if a person plants seeds, we allow hand watering 24/7. And we do give 2 weeks every day for new sod, although the hours are still restricted, but I love the idea of the signs, especially because, yeah, someone could drive by and be like, what the heck is going on? So make sure the signs are 50-foot tall. Send a picture to Judge Marinan of that sign. And I personally, I like the idea of it being here because it's taking the initiative to say, we understand there are needs to be done, and we have a public plot that's available. So I think it's an opportunity to establish that. I also appreciate the irrigation just being that above ground, pretty simple, straightforward one. I thought it was gonna be like the machine that's GPS programmed above ground that I'm starting to see on Facebook every day. Yeah, I have no issue with it. I guess the only question is gonna be long-term after 1 year, if that's an issue for Public Works, if that transition occurred for labor of mowing.
I will tell you, the plot, it's, you could see it's like 30 by 90, so it's about 3,600 square feet, something like that, about 3,000 square feet. So it's not huge, and, you know, when I talked to Marty about that too, he's just like, oh, maybe it's just something that we would, schedule with, with the city or whatever, but it's not a very big research area, so.
Will you need to bring in dirt to replicate the exact conditions at each site to make sure every site has the exact same soil conditions?
Nope, we're not gonna do that. We would
Alright.
just take our soil samples and just as is, knowing that it was renovated, at one point, but, yeah, we're just trying to, cause some other places we're looking at is like Savage, we were looking at Andover, and then our research facility as well.
And technically, are these all seeds that already exist? It's just now trying to find a combo or a hybrid?
Yep, they exist, and some of the mixtures that are being proposed, are like available already. But again, you go to the store and you might see, hardy mixture, but the cultivars maybe aren't the best cultivars. They'll throw in a cheap cultivar to bring the price
Yep.
down, to keep the price down. And we, think or know that some of these could get kind of expensive, but if we're talking about, the best of the best, that's kind of what we're looking for, out of this, research, so.
Gotcha.
I'm all for this, I think for a couple of reasons, so to go back to the watering restrictions, and we do have where they can water for every day, kinda like you were saying, and even if you were having, in the initial 15 days, are you guys watering for, you said it and I forgot, are we talking 6 hours a day? No, it would be, like 5 times a day for like 5 to 10 minutes. So you're meeting that is within we allow that for new planting.
Other than from 5 AM to 5 PM, we wouldn't allow.
We allow it if you
Got
got
it.
the hose on your hand.
Okay.
Yeah, if you were to
So,
hose.
and I guess where I'm going with this is I actually really, I'm kind of okay with giving the exception here. We're talking to the turf pro here, and they're saying that this is what needs to be done, and you guys can do this study and show us that, we have 15 days and we can water for this time period. And that really helps us from a council perspective of, well, what should our policy be? Going back to the last situation where we were looking for some data, we didn't get that, and now we are, right? Well, hopefully we get this data, and, and I just think that could be, very helpful. I think it also really clearly shows that it's just another sign to the DNR that we're taking this very seriously, and we're doing everything we can to move in the right direction. I think one thing that maybe is a little bit of a, I don't know what the right word is, but I feel like most of the grass in the developments is sod that's put in from a sod farm.
Yep.
So, I think we might still be in the issue of, well, do the sod farms use this seed? Maybe that's a potential business opportunity for somebody to sod farm with this mixture for these, but, right now, I don't think many people do seeds in Lake Elmo for the most part, or at least for the new development where most of the water's being used, so.
Most of the developments require sod.
Say again?
Most of the new developments require sod,
Yeah.
they won't let you seed.
Yeah,
If
so
you're
it's
in an
like,
HOA.
correct, so I think there's a little bit of maybe a little disconnect there, but maybe also somebody starts a sod farm with this, that'd be great. Yeah, and, Maybe like
potentially, like, I was thinking about this too, where, if you were to approve of this, where maybe, like, to the right of the research plot, and I'll have to talk to my fellow researcher about this, but maybe we have a plot that is not watered from, 5 to 5, and it's watered before 5 and after 5 to see how it develops. Then you can kind of gauge, well, yeah, this no watering from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. is a complete failure if somebody's trying to establish these new seeds, you know. So, yeah, and we're kind of looking like also beyond that first 15 days just to make sure that we can establish. So it's almost like a special exemption.
Yeah.
You know, beyond the 15 days, just to make sure. But like I said, once you get into September, your watering window needs go down because the intensity of you might have a 90-degree day, but it's only hot from, 1 to 4.
And you're more making that determination of, do we need water a 16th day
Correct.
based off of the water level in the soil? So it's like, it may
Absolutely.
not even go beyond 15.
Correct.
days.
Yep.
But it may, and so you're just saying,
Correct.
hey, if that happens,
Absolutely.
are we
Yep.
good with that?
Yep.
I'm,
As we look to address, our water problem here, and I know that Clock and I have had a couple of discussions, and we talked about the native plants, and my suggestion in that discussion was that's an opportunity for us to reduce our irrigation use. But I think one of the holdbacks is some of what you're seeing here is people are reluctant. First, they don't, what plants? Where should I put them?
Yep.
How would it affect the way that people look at my house? And my thought was, we get a grant and we use our landscape architect to, they just go visit and not drop plant, but say, well, if you put them here and you planted, Timbuktus and acorns or whatever, in this area, you could reduce your lawn by 30%, save water, and will look really nice. But because people are trying to find a way to make their houses look nice, but still they want to save water. And in this case, now you're gonna provide them with potential for grass that will reduce their water use and help us get our water consumption down. And so the fact that we have to make some exception to our irrigation policies and that to achieve a long-term goal that's in our best interest, to me is a no-brainer. I mean, I think this is a great opportunity, and because of where it is, people can go up and take a look and say, look at the type of grass, and what does it look like when I stand and look over? Does it look nice on my lawn? And oh, by the way, can I just overseed my lawn with this tall fescue, and will it take it over? And, I mean, we can provide them with our newsletter with advice about that kind of stuff and drive, our water, irrigation water way down. It's a long-term goal, but it's like requiring, stormwater reuse for irrigation. You gotta have a number of fronts to get to where you need to go.
And if you could get the study to happen in 2 months and be done, that'd be great.
I'd volunteer to give my lawn, but
Yeah, and, that's unfortunate, like, with the sod and the Kentucky bluegrass and the people want it to look nice, so they water it, and then you've got people that maybe don't check their rain sensors, and then it's raining, and then it's irrigating anyways, and you have a lot of issues, and I see it all the time, unfortunately, but yeah, if we could, we're working on like overseeding tall fescue and doing all these things, and we're continually learning, and so yeah, I appreciate the consideration, because I know that this is not necessarily an easy consideration when people might say, well, how come I don't? Well, you actually do get to irrigate, but it's hand watering, which, sometimes can take a while when you have a big yard. But, like I said, with this setup, we, would use low water use nozzles and so, if you have to decide more, if you have any more questions, we're free to answer them,
the other thing I want to point out was approaches like this will help us get that down faster, because unfortunately, we have a fairly high income area, and people don't care what it costs to irrigate. They want green
As long as it
grass.
looks green.
If it's $1,000 a month, I don't care, I can afford it, I want a green lawn.
Yep.
And if we were a, much less affluent community, we have a median household income of like, I don't know, $70,000 or $80,000 or something like that. If it was 30, they'd let their lawn burn, because they have to pick between watering their lawn and having supper. Here, people have to pick between watering their lawn and not having green grass.
We have your contact, and I think we also can have an ongoing conversation as well as to other seed information, other things we could enhance maybe with, when we do new developments. Maybe we start talking about,
City
This-
standard. for
yeah, that it's not sod
compost.
anymore, and now it's netted certain seeds that we know already might be better anyways.
Yep.
Not the best of the best, but I think that's a worthwhile conversation.
Well, and we know that a lot of the like tall fescue and fine fescues, the lower use, and they germinate very quickly, so it's like under the seeding blankets, you're talking, 4 or 5 days. Where the Kentucky bluegrass, why the sod is so readily available, this, you know, the sod producers produce it. It's easy for them, like as far as the process. You roll it up, throw it out, instant lawn. But if you're trying to get Kentucky bluegrass from seed, it's usually 14 to 21 days before germination. And it's just such a slow developing, grass and lawn. That's why people sod it. It's because the seed takes a long time. But like the tall fescue and the fine fescues, they germinate quicker. Fine fescue is a slow grower, so it establishes slower. But like, since it grows slow, that's why it uses less water, less fertilizer needs, things like that. And the tall fescue is just drought tolerant because it's deeply rooted, and so it can go deeper to get the water, where the Kentucky bluegrass goes instantly dormant, you know, the roots are short, and so, yeah, you know, once those Kentucky bluegrass sod lawns are established, if they don't get water, they go dormant quickly. After years, and I see this because of that thatch mat that it comes on, it fails during drought and it's not getting water. I see it a lot, so it looks good for a couple years, and then people are like, I don't want to pay $300 a month for water or more. And they shut off the water, and then their lawn eventually just turns into weeds. So it's a battle. I get it, and but we're here to, you know, educate you, and if it's something that you're interested in doing, you know, I think it'll go a long way into, you know, the battle of.
I think it appears the answer is yes, and thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.
So,
Alright.
our next step would be to invite, Gary back when we have an access agreement drafted by legal. And perhaps, then it would be an opportunity for Gary to present his research project more as, I mean, this is publicly recorded, but to the public as well. Is there anything else that you can think of that he should address during that?
I would hate if I'd missed this. One of the issues that we dealt with is the developers at first were not putting any black dirt down. And then I think, I can't remember, did we change that?
4 inches of a specific topsoil. Do you recall? Jack might recall. There's a specific, like, it's 9C QR TUV topsoil.
And so my thought is not that, like, that is what has to be, you know, used for the research, but again, just if, it's gonna be good information if we know what kind of soils, then again, from when we're making policy decisions about what kind of soil do developers need to put in, I think that would be helpful for us to know too.
Yeah, I know a lot of the developers, what they'll do is they'll scrape that good topsoil and use it in other places. Like, for example, where I live in Otsego, but where the developers, they were supposed to give us like a couple inches for sure of nice black soil. They didn't. We're right on top of the clay, and then they slapped down the Kentucky bluegrass sod. You know, I would have never chosen it, but it was a developer thing, and it's terrible. And everyone in my neighborhood is in the same. You should see how terrible the lawns are because of it. So, yeah, that's definitely an issue for
So,
sure.
yeah, and I guess if that can be addressed in the study, but obviously there's a lot of things that
Yep.
go into that part,
Yep.
other side of it.
I guess, Nicole, if the question is, are there other things we can probe Gary's brain on when he's here next time?
Well, or just that you would like for him to include in his presentation when he comes back for the
Could do
formal, he'll be coming back for the formal request for you to approve an access agreement for him to do the research.
I mean, I don't have anything for that specific thing. I have ideas to probe his brain on long-term, but not for that
I
specific.
think you do estimated water usage, because again, that's gonna be, if that's the complaint of, well, why does he get to water it for 15 days? Well, hey, if you wanna water for 20 days and then not water your yard again for 3 years, we could probably make that deal with you too.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so.
I don't see that gets us anywhere. I just think we take the position that this is a research study, It's in a long-term path district, so reduce water use ultimately, and they need to do this to do the research, and we're gonna allow it because it makes sense from a long-term perspective. If we get into, you can, water, you can't, we're gonna fight, we can't win.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
We'll just say he's from the government, and he's here to help.
You're the only one old enough to know that quote. I know it as a social studies teacher, but
I was gonna say, I think you're old enough to know that quote too then.
I'm up there. Ms. Miller, future agenda items. Anything to mention, or we have it in our packet anyways? Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Miller about those future agenda items? Sounds like that's a no.
Okay.
Any questions for Ms. Johnson?
One thing, for future agenda items, one thing I think we should talk about, and Clarissa and I talked a little bit about it, is the stormwater utility. We get in the budget, we should start thinking about budgeting for a stormwater utility study. And there's a couple of things we want to approach. First is, what should the rates be? And secondly, we don't have really a good system for stormwater credits, and we should look at the equity, the charges. So if you're a development and you have a stormwater pond, and you're paying all the costs of maintaining the pond, you still pay the same stormwater rate as someone who doesn't incur any of those expenses. And so you look at what's the system as a whole and what's fair to each customer, depending on what costs they pay out of their pocket. That's part of controlling stormwater that doesn't fall on the rest of the ratepayers. And what should be credits for things like, we're going to this grass, what kind of credit should you get then? Because there's runoff that comes from the lawn too. And so it's kind of an all-encompassing thing. And Clarissa and I talked about that, and she said what would be good to do for the budget for 2026, include that in there. But maybe want to have some thought about it, some ideas. I know that the mayor's had some complaints about the stormwater charges from someone in his area that has a farm field or doesn't get the credit. I don't know all the exact particulars, but it would just seem it would be a good thing to do, and would make sense. And if you remember, when we looked at it last time, the current stormwater fee doesn't even cover its operating costs.
And that's something you and the mayor have enough ability to provide feedback to staff to create the item?
Yes. We can create an RFP, me and Clarissa or the mayor and,
The workshop item.
oh, workshop, yeah, we can do that too. Yep, no problem.
Yeah, and Marty or someone can bring the information about our stormwater credit program
Yep.
as well. Okay, well, I'll work with Clarissa when she gets back to see when she'd be ready for that.
Yes.
Okay.
She'll probably want to speak in German when she comes back, but, we'll tell her she has to speak English. She went to Germany.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Figured.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch. Achtung.
As we're just gonna keep going and going, meeting adjourned.